We're back once again, only on it's Last Call. Last Call at the Alcohol, only on the LastCallPodcast.com. And joining me once again, it's the football season's upon us. We're previewing conferences. We already touched base on Notre Dame. We've touched base on Auburn coming up. And now we got to talk about the SEC in general. And join me here to break everything down and more. I give you from Tailgate Talk SEC and a Home Squad Sports podcast. I give you it is college football extraordinaire, trash talker, and knowledge dropper. I give you Will Thomas. So, Will, let's jump right into this here and start things off with the most talked about program in college football for many, many years, still now. The Alabama Crimson Tide. For good news, Ryan Williams-Coleman is back on offense. Bad news is nobody else is back on offense. The entire offense is gone, either graduation, transfer, going to the NFL early. What are you hearing? Like, if you're right, I know right now the people are like, all right, it's not going to panic, but we're not going to panic. But who's the quarterback? What's going on with the offensive line? How big, is this offense going to look in terms of being new, different, and just questions?
Yeah, I mean, so to your first point, right? I mean, a lot of it is brand new, right? We're going to have a new quarterback there in Tuscaloosa. At running back, you're losing Jam Miller. It's a lot of unproven names there. And at receiver, you brought up Ryan Cole Williams. He's back. Latsier Brooks, he's back for his sophomore year. But when I look at these new pieces for Alabama, I get giddy. Like, I get so excited about what the potential is for these new pieces. First off, Keelan Russell, I do believe, is going to get that starting job over Austin Mack. Bill Connolly at ESPN, he has Russell rated as one of the most important quarterbacks in the country this year. And if a guy is going to have more knowledge, than the average fan into a quarterback battle, I think that Bill Connolly is up there. So I do believe that you're going to see Keelan get that starting job. I mean, he's an absolute firecracker, right? 6'3", 194, just coming into his redshirt freshman year. He was a top 5 overall player in his recruiting class. And that receiver room, Ryan Williams is there. Latsier Brooks is there. They ported in Noah Rogers, who did get hurt during the spring, but he'll be back at some point in the middle of the season. Sedarian Morgan is not being talked about nearly enough. He's going to be a true freshman. So obviously most people haven't heard of him yet. He's 6'4", 223. Now that sounds pretty big. It's even bigger when you realize that he's the biggest guy in that Bama receiver room already, and he hasn't played a snap of college football yet. He was one of the most elite recruits in the country coming from Alabama, and he and Keelan Russell already had an elite connection during the spring, right? I mean, all the headlines coming out of A-Day was, look at how good Keelan Russell looks throwing the ball to Sedarian Morgan. So you return, 2 of your top 3 receivers from last year if you are Alabama, or 2 of your top 4, sorry. And then you bring in Sedarian Morgan, who I believe could do as a true freshman what Ryan Williams did. And that's kind of just take the entire conference by storm and immediately be one of the best receivers, not just on Alabama, but really maybe in the entire country. And then in terms of the offensive line, there aren't some names that are going to totally blow you away, right? They bring in some transfers like Javen James from Mississippi State. You bring in Racine Delgado there at center. The way that I'm looking at this is that Bama's coaches, I believe they're not total morons, and they have zero incentive to not improve on that offensive line from what it was last year. So I look at the pieces that they have, whether it's backups coming up, whether it's transfers coming in. I'm kind of just going in here and I'm trusting Alabama and saying that they improved on their offensive line from last year, frankly, because how much worse could it possibly be? So I think you're going to see an upgraded offensive line for a new starter and likely Keelan Russell. My biggest question is the running back room because Daniel Hill hasn't proven he can be a workhorse back. Kevin Riley, A.K. Deer, but another true freshman is Xavier Crowell, who is 5'11", 221, ran for over 2,600 yards as a senior in high school. There are 2 true freshmen on this offense in Crowell and Darian Morgan, who I believe can be superstars, and Keelan Russell, I believe he gets that starting job, and he picks it up sooner rather than later.
When you say, "Oh yeah, it can't get worse," your left tackle is either a freshman Jackson Lloyd or a sophomore Tyrell Miller. Look, I get it. Making fun of Caleb Proctor last year was basically like the national pastime for everybody, but still, if whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Mack, whether it's Russell, you're gonna now rely on either a freshman or a sophomore be left tackle. Like, is there a concern that the offensive line might just be worse than last year? Because literally, there isn't like this All-American or returning starter. There's a bunch of guys going, "Hi, my name is," and trying to figure out, can they play? Is it the right position? And are they actually, good enough to hold up in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely concern that there might be some weak points, but I mean, the offensive line last year, as bad as it was, Bama still went and won 10 games with a receiver core that could not catch the ball, with Jam Miller, who had multiple concussions, I think, throughout the year. So even though everything went wrong last year, you still saw this Alabama team and their offense be good enough to go win 10 games, make it to Atlanta, and win a road playoff game. And I look at the skill positions this year, I think the ceiling is higher. And, at that tackle spot, yeah, Jackson Lloyd, he was back up last year as a true freshman, only played in 5 games. 6'7", 318 is good enough size where I think that with a full offseason of prepping, he can be at least serviceable. And then Javen James, pitcher from Mississippi State, he'll be at right tackle, but even though he's not the blindside guy, I trust him to be able to stand up to a good bit of edge rushers. I just think that the talent level of Alabama nationally, it's kind of getting looked at as, oh, they haven't, they've fallen off since Nick Saban. What a surprise. This team isn't what they used to be. Sure, that's true. There's not a shortage of talent in Tuscaloosa, though. It's very far from it. And I think the coaching staff there, I trust their development. I trust their personnel scouting. I think there are good enough players at tackle. And it's kind of the story of this whole offense for me is, sure, I'm pointing to a lot of guys who don't have a lot of experience, but these guys are really good football players. I think they're going to jump on a lot of teams in the SEC this year and really surprise a ton of people with just how good they actually can be.
Defense should again be loaded. You have Yazane Pierre, outside linebacker. The safeties, Bray Hubbard, Keon Sabb, maybe say are probably the best in the SEC. Xavier Brown returns, and as you were telling me off air, they went for size. They went in for a defensive tackle and brought in Oregon's Terrence Green, 6'5", 320. UFC's Devin Tompkins, 6'5", 300. And then they brought in Caleb Woodson, a very prime transfer for the inside linebacker. Could this defense be better than last year's when you look at it?
I think so. I mean, this stuff, I think for as good as their offense can be, I think defense is probably their strength. I mean, this secondary is probably one of the best in the SEC to me, maybe even the country, right? You brought up bringing back Xavier Brown. Dijon Lee is back after being freshman all SEC last season. And then at safety, Bray Hubbard, all SEC first teamer last year. You bring him back. I mean, a lot of people thought he was gone. He is back in Tuscaloosa. Also, Keon Sabb and Xavier Mincy there. And then you brought up a bunch of the portal lads in that front seven. This defensive line, Yanze Pierre, you brought him up as the stud. He had 8 sacks, 14 and a half TFLs last season. I think he can have even more this year because he's going to have arguably even more help this fall than he did last year. And there were plenty of good players on Bama's D-line in that linebacker core last season, but I think the portal ads you mentioned in that front seven make it even stronger where Pierre's going to be left in a bunch of one-on-one situations where the one blocking him just can't keep up. So for all the concerns we had about Bama's offense, maybe, the offensive line, can it fully click? I think the defense is going to be able to keep them in a ton of games where the offense, if they have those holes, it can be okay. So, relying on this defense for Alabama, I do believe is going to be it's going to be a luxury for them as they break in a bunch of new pieces on offense and, for all the transfers you mentioned in that front seven and just how good this secondary can be. The defense, I think, could be awesome.
Is that weird about transfers? Like usually Alabama could just recruit, never have to go over transfer portal. Now, as we saw, it's Green, Devin Tompkins, Bingley Jones, Caleb Smith, Woodson, all from the transfer portal. Offensive line, as you mentioned, Javen James, Rayson Delgatti, Caden Strayhorn, Nick Brooks, all from the transfer portal. Like, how weird is that for Alabama fans where it's like, all right, yeah, we can't just rely on the high school and developing. They're now dipping their toes into a transfer portal more and more.
Yeah, it's funky, right? I mean, yeah, like you said, it's not at all what they are accustomed to having to do, but it's just kind of the reality of this landscape of college football, right? I mean, there's only maybe 2 teams, 3 or 4 teams that don't need to go into the portal all the time. And it's like Notre Dame, Clemson because they refuse to, and then, who maybe like Ohio State. There's only a few teams in the entire country who don't need to go to the portal to supplement their teams. Now, obviously, a bunch of those schools will do it because they can as a luxury, but it's definitely a lot different for Alabama, and it's just part of the adjustment period because you lose Nick Saban at the same time that the landscape of the sport changes. So it's 2 massive, adjustments that a team would have to go through, and for Alabama fans, they have it at the same time. So it looks so much different for the Tide, but I think, for all the talk about how Bama isn't what they used to be, is DeBoer really a good coach? A, Yes, he is. He's a great coach. And Bama is still right up there where they can compete for the SEC. They can get to the playoffs. So even though it looks a lot different during the offseason and, maybe on the field you're missing a degree of toughness or that killer instinct, Bama's still right there. So I think for if you are a Crimson Tide fan, there's still so much to be excited about, even though it does look a lot different.
Schedule starts off a bit easy-ish. It's East Carolina at Kentucky, Florida State, then South Carolina. Then it's the second half where you go, ooh, this could get a bit ugly. October 10th, Georgia. October 17th at Tennessee. 24th, Texas A&M. Then November 7th at LSU. Like, could this be the year where you were like going, oh crap? Well, Alabama has 4 losses before they even get to Auburn. Like, is this one of those? I know you have hope, and there's a lot of fans in Auburn who have, in Alabama who have hope. There's a lot of fans in Alabama like, oh my god, this could be a real long year. So, what should success look like? Getting to 8, 9 wins and going, all right, hey, look, we had to rebuild everything, or are 11 wins still in play? Do you think?
I think that success looks like a playoff berth. Whether that is, 10-2, people are saying this is the year we get 9-3 and in the playoff. I still don't really think that's going to happen, but I think success for Bama does still look like a playoff berth, or at least, going to the SEC title game, which does normally go hand in hand with going to the playoff. But to your point, the schedule definitely lines up where if, let's say, offensive tackle doesn't work out, maybe the secondary isn't as solid or a guy goes down, where, losable games, Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, LSU, Auburn, in the rivalry sense, like all those games are losable. And going through the schedule, I had them sitting there at 10-2. I have their 2 losses actually coming to not even the best teams on their schedule, just because of kind of how we've seen DeBoer teams operate. But the schedule does line up where there are. It's just, I mean, it's what the SEC is at this point in time, right? Where you're going to have 5 or 6 games where if you're not playing to the best of your ability, you can and likely will lose. So there's always that potential for maybe a bit of a fall off. I don't really see that happening, but to answer your original question, right? Success for Alabama this season, I think it's kind of what it is for just the top half of the SEC programs, and that's make the playoff because you have 12 spots, or I guess 11 because of G6. But there are enough spots in the playoff where success looks like getting to that postseason and playing for a championship.
Let's talk some Arkansas football quickly. Quincy Rhodes back. So the good news is Ryan Satterfield has a stud on defensive line. But like Alabama, there's going to be a lot of questions. Is it KJ Jackson, AJ Lee starting quarterback? What's going on with their offensive line? Because they brought in 3 transfers, which we'll get to. Is Braylon Russell the answer? Is Sutton Smith the answer at running back? What should we expect right now from a new coach who people are like, all right, hey, he's considered a great coach. Could have taken other jobs besides this. Like, there's optimism, but what should be, I guess, realistic right now when you look at the Arkansas Razorbacks offense?
Yeah, I think Silverfield is getting a little bit overlooked in terms of the new hires in the SEC. Like he's kind of getting just brushed off as an afterthought, which I think that's too extreme. I don't necessarily think he performs, in the top 2 or 3 of those new hires this year, but I do think he can do some good things at Arkansas. And you talked about that quarterback battle. I do believe it will be KJ Jackson, right? Even though AJ Hill followed Silverfield to Arkansas, I think that KJ, just having been there for a few more years, he'll get that job. It's going to have to go through Braylon Russell on offense, though, because I mean, he was Doak preseason. He was on the Doak Walker preseason award watch list last season, but then Mike Washington Jr. happened. But now Russell's there to kind of take the reins. Sutton Smith should be a good compliment to him, and that receiver room for Arkansas, I have a really hard time getting excited about almost any of it. So it's already going to be a bit of a bad situation for whichever quarterback does get that job. The running back room is going to have to be important. Defensively, you brought him up. Quincy Rhodes Jr., he has to go berserk for this defense to really be a great unit. 8 sacks, 15.5 TFLs last year. He's going to be the bright spot on a defense that has a lot of questions this year. And I think for the offense, right, it'll either be KJ Jackson or Braylon Russell who are the bright spots in the same way. So I think this year for Silverfield, it's a kind of proof of concept. Can you go win one of your home games against a better team, like maybe Tennessee, Carolina comes in there, LSU at the end of the year? You never know what could happen. So for Silverfield, can you go catch 5 wins? Because that would more than double your win total from last season. A bowl game would be great, but it's just kind of, can you show improvement? Can you show flashes? Can you maybe catch a better team than you at home and just kind of show that proof of concept?
One good news for Arkansas, we touched on earlier, it's the offensive line. All of them are starters. They got Caden Kittler and Kobe Brand. Bremen back. Then they added Bryant Williams from Louisiana and Kavion Broussard from Ohio as tackles. Guard Malachi Breland came from Memphis. So that starting offensive line, at least, you can look and go, all right, they can play in college, we know. And it takes a little bit of time to gel, but does that give Arkansas, Ryan Setterfield at least Silverfield, at least just some, like, all right, hey, I can run the ball a lot. Until I figure out who else I have besides C.J. Brown, wide receiver, I can at least run the ball and go, all right, we can control the clock and not let our quarterback get killed.
Yeah, it certainly does because like we brought up, bringing a new quarterback. I don't know how many weapons he has. You got to be able to block for him and at least give him time to figure it out snap to snap. And in the worst case, you have to make holes for Russell, for Sutton Smith, so you only have to throw the ball 15, 20 times a game. So that offensive line, I mean, obviously kind of a cliche, but that is going to be the starting point for this Arkansas offense, even more so just because of how many questions we do have at both quarterback and all those skill spots.
Defense, they went heavy with transfer portal. They welcomed in Virginia tackle Hunter Osborne. They welcomed in Carson Jones from USC, Trajan Odom, Zadian Sims. They brought in from Buffalo Jaquan Smith. I mean, you look at here, they've literally, whether it's both cornerbacks, both safety, both, two defensive tackles. It's a lot of new people here. How much pressure is there in Quincy Rhodesville to be the guy, the one that everybody says, hey, he is a top, possibly top 10 pick in the NFL draft. He is a guy that, they want more consistency from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton because you brought up in the secondary on their two deep effectively, and this is just of 11 guys I have written down. There is one returner from the team last year, and that is Miguel Mitchell, who only started in 3 games last year. Everybody else is a transfer. So you have all of that new in the secondary who they still have to gel to a certain degree, right? It's not like as, 5 = 1 like the offensive line is, but at secondary, you've got to all be on the same page. So with that many transfers, how quickly does that gel early on in the season? Quincy Roche have a lot to say about that. And so can a guy like Jamonte Waller coming over from Auburn. If they just don't give the other quarterback that much time, that secondary can play a lot more free and with a lot less pressure. So there's tons of pressure on Rhodes to go, put pressure on opposing offenses as by far the best player on this defense. Because, I mean, just with how many transfers you just mentioned, there's just so many questions about are they really going to be able to gel as an effective unit of 11 at least early on in the year, because the beginning of their schedule, all in all, it's not impossible, but maybe I take that back. Actually, it's very hard to start the season, right? You go to Utah in week 2. Your first 2 conference games are hosting Georgia and going to Texas A&M. Their defense is going to get it run up on them if they're not ready early. Right, Devin Dampier, Gunnar Stockton, Marcel Reed, they will have a field day with a weak secondary and a limited pass rush. So Rhodes has got to be on it quickly, and the secondary has to gel very fast if Arkansas doesn't want to start slipping early on in the year.
Can Arkansas win an SEC game? I mean, I'm not giving them, we're not saying, oh, yeah, they need to get to the playoffs. They need to have a winning season. If you're Arkansas fans, like, all right, can we just not go 0-9 in the SEC? I mean, is that possible, or is this still a team that you look and going, man, Ryan Silverfield has a lot of work ahead of him. He just really needs years to get this program back up.
I do. I think they get one at least, right? I mean, the home games against Tennessee and Carolina, those are your most winnable ones. LSU, Missouri, and Georgia also go in there. They have a game at Auburn that I actually think is a funky spot for the Tigers. I think they can catch them, but just with obviously Arkansas has these two. But with just the amount of first-year coaches and first-year quarterbacks, they can't all work out. Now, could Arkansas be one of those? 100% they could. But I think there are going to be enough games on their schedule that are winnable and that are in good situations for them. Like they catch Tennessee the week before Tennessee plays Alabama. Right? That's a look-ahead spot. They catch Auburn at the end of a gauntlet of at Georgia, LSU, at Ole Miss. That's just a worn-down spot. So there are enough advantageous scheduling dynamics in Arkansas' schedule and so much new on their schedule that I do believe they catch at least one conference game and have that improvement on from last season.
All right, let's get to one of the wild card teams in this whole shindig, and that is the Florida Gators. And yes, we talked earlier during this year about what psychopath it is, John Sumrall. Father died, and him and his family go to the funeral. Then they go to this guy, Jaden Bond's family, the next day because of a issue, and he has said this is family. The skeptic in me is going to go, yes, Jaden Bond is basically the straw that stirs the offensive drink for the Florida Gators. So, all right, let's just dive right into this. As the season goes, so does Jaden Bond and vice versa. I mean, are the Gators going to rely on this guy for almost everything?
It's going to be a lot, right? He was all SEC second team last year, excuse me. Broke 1,000 yards. What's good for Ball though is that he has a lot more help this year, I believe, than he did last year. You have Duke Clark, who's there as a redshirt freshman. He's being tabbed a breakout candidate by everybody who has boots on the ground in Gainesville ahead of fall camp here. And there are two transfers in Evan Pryor from Cincinnati, who's a redshirt senior, and Lyndon Montgomery from East Carolina as a redshirt junior. There's a ton of help there for Jaden Ball, where this is actually why I'm excited about this for Kewan Lacey too, as more depth behind him as well at Ole Miss. You're going to be able to take 5 or 6 carries maybe off his plate per game, which is going to help him so much just in fourth quarters and towards the end of the season. So it's going to be a lot put on Jaden Ball, but he's able to delegate that around him. And this Florida offense, they have tons of talent at receiver, right? Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III. You portal in Eric Singleton, Micah Mays, Bailey Stockton, new quarterback, questions at offensive line. But the skill positions for Florida, I would stack them up with a lot of teams, not really just in the SEC, but also in the country. The range of outcomes for this Florida team this year is like 10-2 to 5-7. There are so many ways this year can go, and Jaden Ball is definitely going to be one of the key cogs in that.
We talked about before, the offseason. Like, all right, it's Aaron Philo's team, but man, Trammell Jones is still there, and the coach, and they made sure to keep him. So that's one of the things here, I guess, early on. It's like, all right, you look at the schedule. It's Florida Atlantic, it's Campbell, then right to the teeth. How much, I guess, rope does Aaron Philo have? Because again, the offensive coordinator, as we talked about, they brought in Buster Faulkner to help him out. Jones is still the guy who Florida fans, have a passion for. So, could we see an early yank? Like as you said, this offense has lots of potential, lots of talent. Does Philo have to, come out guns ablazing the first couple games, or if not, do they go to Trammell Jones?
Well, first off, every single day that passes and they haven't announced Philo as the starter, I get more and more confident that it's just not going to be his job, right? Because coming in, right, he portaled in with his offensive coordinator, right, with a guy in Singleton at receiver who he's thrown with before. Every single structural advantage went Philo's way, and he hasn't taken the job. He hasn't even taken a public lead on the job. Now, to a degree, that's coach speak, obviously by someone not revealing too much, but if you were confident what Philo could do for you, you have his OC, you have familiarity, why wouldn't he be the starter? So I think that Jones is for the most part outplaying him, like consistently speaking. And they're just waiting for Philo to go get that job. And the fact that he hasn't yet, I don't even know if Philo actually gets the starting nod in week one. And whichever guy they go with, right, even though Philo was the expectation, there's no reason to be negative on Trammell Jones because I believe his ceiling is really high too. So if Trammell does end up getting that job, I believe that his ceiling is probably a little bit higher and his floor is just lower than Philo because of lack of familiarity. But with the quarterback gig, man, until they announce Philo, I'm really up in the air on who it'll be because if Philo was really the better quarterback than Trammell Jones, I think it would have happened and been announced by now. So that's something to watch during fall camp here.
Various people think this could be the best front seven for the Gators since 2019. You look at it, and again, it's L.J. McCrary. It is led by linebackers Miles Graham and Jaden Robinson. You have a lot of young talent in Brendan Bell, Jeremiah McCord, Jaden Woods. How good could they be? Because they brought in a defensive coordinator, Brad White from Kentucky, who loves the 3-4 scheme, loves to attack. How good is this defense right now?
Yeah, it can be really good. Their D tackle's a bit of a question mark. And now that derail the front seven and what those edge rushers and linebackers can do, but it's in the D tackle room. Joseph Mbachu is a sophomore who played in 9 games last year. Brandon Bett is a redshirt junior. He played in all 12 games last year, but he wasn't necessarily like this mammoth of a guy. DK Kalu is a transfer. Jeremiah McLeod is a sophomore. So D tackle's a bit of a question, but that edge room, right? Jaden Woods, who was freshman all SEC last year, he was in the portal almost went to Texas. Summerall brought him back. They bring over Emmanuel Yebadejo from Jacksonville State. He had 4.5 sacks last year. He is 6'7", 303 pounds. And KJ Ford is a true freshman there off the edge. People cannot stop talking about what he could do in his first year. Now, linebacker, you mentioned Miles Graham. Aaron Childs is also back in that room. He had 52 tackles last year. He is coming into his junior year. So this front seven has so many guys who were, that they were lured in the transfer portal, but they stuck it out in Gainesville. My only question is the tackle, who's able to step up, because edge and linebacker I'm really excited about, and they can be just wreaking havoc all season long just because of how many individual star potential players they have there.
Secondary is a bit of a worry. I mean, we're not going to panic, but it's not certain. I mean, you got redshirt freshman Ben Hanks III, who was at supposedly one corner. They have Bryce Thornton coming back, which is a good thing. He'll provide stability. DJ Coleman, Cam Dooley are transfers. Dijon Johnson is penciled in right now at the other corner. Again, can they live sometimes with maybe some mistakes because this secondary is, not what it used to be?
I think they can. And you brought up Dijon Johnson. Right now, as fall camp opens, he was in a non-contact jersey with a sleeve on his right leg because he tore his meniscus in week 3 last year, had surgery on it, and then had a secondary procedure after spring. His health is pretty important, right? Because if you lose Dijon, I trust the guy right behind him, Cormani McLean. But then if you have McLean and Ben Hanks as your two corners, behind those two guys, I don't know what you have. So you really need Dijon there for Florida to have a good secondary. And then also in the safety room, they bring over Cam Dooley, Kentucky, right? So he's there with Brad White. He has familiarity there. And Drake Stubbs also at safety. He's a sophomore, former 5-star guy. So there's a lot of talent there in Florida secondary. It's also really raw and really young. So that's a high ceiling, low floor situation. And that's why you need that edge rushers, right? You alluded to it. If that front seven can be getting pressure, it takes so much off of this secondary's plate. If they're not getting that, then the questions show up of, Ben Hanks, really talented guy, former 5-star kid. As a redshirt freshman, can he hang with the likes of a Cam Coleman in the SEC? Right? Is Dijon Johnson, A, is he healthy? B, is he 100%? Like, is he out there, but is he limited? And then at safety, do you trust those guys to be able to really blanket and not let anybody behind them? There are definitely questions. I'm not quite there on concerns. My only concern is the health of Dijon, but I trust the talent of the Florida secondary to at least be decent. That's why to me it's only really a question, but the front seven is definitely going to be very important for the success of the secondary, at least early on, until you see them all really get reps against this competition.
So here's a $1 million question, or I guess in this case, the $6 million question per year. Can John Summerall get this team to learn how to win quickly? Last year, as you saw, there were games where they looked great against Texas, and then they would look stupid against teams like Georgia at times, Ole Miss. They lose heartbreakers against teams like South Florida, LSU. As you said, he is a psychopath they've brought in to basically get his team meaner, tougher, more disciplined, and to awake the sleeping giant. There are these people who are going, hey, they're a sleeper for it, who could squeeze in at 9 wins, maybe 10 wins. Hey, we're buying Florida, but can he teach them quickly how to win and not, just crumble when things don't go their way in the game?
I do think he can, right? Because his intensity clearly is not fake. I mean, that's been shown from Troy people, Tulane people who have just talked about him since he got to Florida. It's been shown by what he said at media days, how he looked in practice. So his intensity is very, very real. But I mean, truthfully, when it comes to how does that, translate to the fourth quarter in a close game, I just don't know if we're going to know that until it happens, right? Because right now it's a whole bunch of hypothetical. It's a lot of conjecture. You can look at what he did at Tulane, which was great, at Troy, which was great. But with this group of guys, it's hard to know for sure until we get to that situation. Now, am I very confident it'll be better than what Billy Napier was doing? Absolutely, I am. It should be leaps and bounds ahead of what Napier is doing in terms of mental toughness, fortitude, things like that. But it's going to be really hard to know, until they get to Jordan Hare in that first conference game. How do they react to that road environment? First road start for whichever quarterback it is there at Florida. And then it's a really hard schedule, but like you said. So we're not really going to know until we get there, but I do believe it will be an upgrade just based on how much more intensity Summerall has than Napier, than Florida had last year.
Lost in the SEC talk is, Georgia. Everybody's going, oh, yeah, well, LSU, we'll get to them. Texas, we'll get to them. But Georgia last year, they were, well, the SEC champions. They were 12-2. They were 7-1 in the SEC. Gunnar Stockton proved, hey, he can be a legit quarterback. So let's start with the offense. The good news is, offensive line is mostly back. Left tackle Ernest Green, the third, Drew Bobo, Dontrell Glover. You've got running back Nate Frazier, Lawson Lucky at tight end, Gunnar Stockton. Bad news is that wide receiver room is younger than basically almost a newborn baby. We're not sure who's going to be the right tackle, but hey, the offense should be fine. So is Gunnar Stockton an elite quarterback, or is he just a guy that last year had a lot of weapons around him, and this is now, okay, let's prove if you can elevate talent around you?
I do think Gunner's an elite quarterback. It's just not the flashy way that catches people's eyes. Right? Because, like, I mean, everything he does is right. You're never really going to watch a play that Gunner makes and be like, holy shit, what did I just watch? But you're just going to be like, wow, I don't know when the last time the ball hit the ground was. Or, like, man, the defense, this secondary is just nowhere near these passes. So he's elite in that sense, but he's not really going to wow you. But I agree with you about the receiver room. I don't know where their explosives come from. I don't know where their downfield threat is, right? Because Zachariah Branch, Dylan Bell, Colby Young, they're gone. They're not there anymore. So how much can you rely on the ground game? How much can those separate within 8 yards to the line of scrimmage, right? Where they actually can succeed? I have a good bit of questions about the explosiveness and the downfield threat of this Georgia offense. I have none about their running game. I have none about their physicality, right? You have Nate Frazier there's RB1, Chauncey Bowen is RB2. They were going to have Dante Dowdell, who came over from Kentucky. He got hurt in an ATV accident, and I think he's out for the entire year. So that's a pretty big loss, but you still have Frazier and Bowens. They're at 1 and 2. I will never not trust a Kirby Smart offensive line until I watch it literally be pathetic. So I think Georgia's going to be able to run the ball really well. I trust that Stockton's going to make no mistakes and not put them behind the chains, but I don't know if they can go score in 2 minutes. Right? I don't know if they can come back from down 2, maybe even 3 scores, just because of the nature of how I think they're going to score their points. So I don't really have questions about can Georgia, have a high success rate on their drives, but I wonder how many drives they get, right? Because of how much is it going to be running the ball, how much is it going to be short, just wear you down plays versus can they actually get downfield and be explosive.
Who starts at right tackle? Is it the 6'10" Jazair Jackson, or is it the returning sort of veteran Juan Gaston, who played also guard? Like, again, they had a smorgasbord of offensive line talent last year, and well, now all of a sudden they still have it. But who's going to be the right tackle? That's, I guess, the big question, because every team is going to try to find a hole, and if there's a big hole in tackle, teams are going to basically try to abuse it. So who starts, do you think, for right tackle for the Georgia Bulldogs?
From what I've seen so far, I do believe it's going to be Juan Gaston. Obviously, with fall camp starting this week, I'm sure we'll get a really good feel for that in about next 72 hours. But I do think you'll get Gaston. I mean, he's 6'7", 360, right? So physically, he's more than the part. He had a couple of injury issues early on in the year, but he still did appear in 13 games. I think he expands his role this season, gets to start at right tackle. Who I'm really excited about on this offensive line, though, is Zyke Hilton. I think he's going to start at guard. He is a true freshman, right? 6'3", 300 pounds. He was only a 3-star recruit, right? So when he signed, it wasn't even like this guy is a stud. He's going to be a day one contributor. He just showed up on campus and started being better than everybody else, right? He was their starter in the spring. It should say that way when we get to the fall. So one of the most excited pieces one of the pieces I'm most excited for, about the Georgia offensive line is Zyke Hilton. They're at guard. And I think that, he can just help out with the right tackle when he's on that right guard spot a little bit if he has to. Georgia's offensive line should be fine, but the right tackle question is fair, and we should get an answer to that pretty soon-ish here with fall camp getting underway.
Defense, less questions. They have 21 defenders who played meaningful action last year. Gabe Harris is back. Xavier McLeod is back. Raylan Wilson, Ellis Robinson, KJ Bolden, Kyron Jones, Quintavious Johnson. Let's talk about the big addition. It's a coach. It is pass rush technician Larry Knight, who's going to hopefully teach these guys how to rush the passer, get to them better. Who has right now the best in terms of talent in the front seven, where you look and go, they could be a pass rush team. They could be somebody, because they've been missing that for last year a lot. Who's the guy right now that you look and go, this might be the guy who can take a step forward for that defense.
Yeah, I think it's probably Gabe Harris. He's a senior coming back. He had 6.5 TFLs, only one sack last season, but at 6'4", 260, and you watch his tape, you just watch how he rushes, you would expect he had a lot more than that. Right? Because, I mean, Georgia was still good at generating pressure last year. They just never really got sacks. It was kind of a weird quirk. I think that adding Knight to just give Gabe Harris, that extra tenth of a second that he can use to get to the quarterback just that much faster, I think you can see him get up. I don't want to say double digit sacks, almost just because of how many guys can get 3 or 4 sacks this year on this D line. I think Gabe Harris can take that jump, given that he played just about every single game last year. You watch his tape, you love what you see. I think he can take the biggest jump probably in terms of sack numbers and pass rush production.
They only took one transfer in terms of big names that was in the transfer portal. That's Khalil Barnes. He's going to be either the star of a nickelback. How good is the secondary for Georgia? I mean, is this one of those where you look and go, they can shut people down? This could be maybe one of their best they've ever had.
I think it can be really, really good, right? Just talking about the safety room first, like you brought up. You have Khalil Barnes coming over from Clemson, super good veteran guy, really quality player. And then KJ Bolden, I mean, NFL draft guys are just, I mean, they're in love with what KJ Bolden can do, and for good reason. He's really good. Tyreek Green as a true freshman. Kirby Smart can't stop talking about him, and I trust Kirby's opinion on DBs more than anyone in the country. So I think the safety room is really good. Then at corner, Elvis Robinson the fourth. He was a freshman All America first year from the Athletic last year, tied for first in the SEC with 4 picks as a true freshman. Who's that second corner? That is my only question, right? DeMello Jones as a junior, Braylon Conley as a redshirt sophomore coming from USC, Jetty Williams goes over from Oklahoma. Which one of those three names can be corner number two? I love every other part of this secondary. Once corner two gets answered for me and I'm able to watch them really play a good quality game against a good receiving core, then I'm going to sit back and be like, Georgia is not getting, 400 yards on them in a single game this year through the air. So I love every other piece about this secondary. Cornerback two is where my only question is.
All right. You don't want to say because you don't want to jinx them, but no LSU, no Texas A&M, no Texas. Oklahoma's at home. They don't play Ole Miss till November. They play at Alabama, but they get them October 10th. And my cousin's gonna kill me here. Could Georgia go undefeated? Because there's people like, we can do this. Hey, we have faith in Gunnar Stockton. In Kirby Smart we trust. Could this team go undefeated going into the SEC, championship game?
I don't think so. And it's really mostly because of what I brought up with their offense. I just don't know if they can score 35 at least regularly because I think it's going to be just a lot of running the ball. So then by nature, you're going to have that clock run on you. It's just going to take longer. Can they come back from down multiple scores? And in terms of teams I believe can do that, I think Oklahoma, they can jump you and put up 14 quickly. Bama and Ole Miss certainly can. That game against Florida, I mean, I think Florida's gotten way better from last year. Georgia, I don't know. Florida almost beat them last year in Jacksonville. So I think there's enough losable games on the Georgia schedule. Their offense, can they execute a 2-minute drill? I trust Gunnar Stockton. Can a receiver get open downfield? We just don't know that yet. So I don't really see it holding up for Georgia. I think you probably do. I think you get to 2 losses, honestly. If you are Kirby and the Bulldogs here, which is still plenty to get to the playoff, maybe to Atlanta based on who those losses are to and what the rest of the league looks like. I think the schedule is hard enough. I have questions about how quickly they can score. I don't really know if you get Georgia going 12-0 this year. They'll be really good, obviously. I don't want to, be one of these idiots who thinks that, Kirby's going to fall off this year. He's not. I just think that 12-0 is damn near impossible for any team in the conference this year.
All right. When you talk Kentucky, you talk usually, all right, they're going to be middling. They're not going to be that good. Or, hey, they'll be tough. And now Willie Stein has come in, and he's feeling himself. He has some swagger. He's telling people at the press conference, hey, we're going to be very, very good. They brought in, and it starts the offensive line. They went heavy in the transfer portal. They got Shabola at right guard, Colton Price at center, and Olas Ainen at left guard, and this guy here, Lance Hurd, the big transfer from Tennessee at left tackle. Is this going to be a good offensive line? Could this be for Kentucky like one of the rare times where they look at their offensive line and go, okay, no matter who we have a quarterback and running back, these guys will be able to block successfully and control the line?
Yeah, I absolutely love Kentucky this year. And a lot of it is because of the all in you brought up, right? All that experience, all the size. I mean, Lance Hurts, 6'6", 325. Shabola, 6'6", 329. Allen, another 6'6" guy, 329, coming from Alabama. There's so much size. There's so much experience from other programs where I trust their O-line development, right? Tennessee, great. Ohio State. Bama is Bama. Colton Price at Baylor, maybe less of a pipeline, but he was all Big 12 offensive line second team last year, so you know he's good. That O-line is going to be really good. I think Kenny Minchey is going to be awesome, right? And a lot of that is thanks to that offensive line. But he was at Notre Dame last year. He hasn't done it yet as a starter. He's only been in 10 career games, mainly just in garbage time. He was CJ Carr almost didn't get that job last year. And now he's a Heisman favorite, and he was awesome last season. So how good do we think Kenny Minchey is? I don't think he's that far behind CJ Carr because of what we saw in the quarterback battle last season. So I think you got a really good offensive line. You have a really good quarterback, a receiver room that I think could be so sneaky good. I'm really excited about what Kentucky can do this year, mainly on offense.
How good is Kenny Minchie though? I mean, again, yes, he Notre Dame had C.J. Card. He barely beat him, but you could argue that hey, that just means C.J. Card started off slow and was great, and Kenny Minchie, for all we know, could be just a guy. Like I mean, again, I get it. Everybody's excited because hey, we're talking about the leadership, the athleticism, the person that Kenny Minchie is, but how tough is it, putting pressure on a guy who, as you said, never started a game, never really played any meaningful minutes, in crunch time. Like this is a guy who's basically like, what if? That is the big question. What if Kenny Minchie is very good, or what if he's very terrible?
Yeah, it's hard, but like I brought it up earlier with when talking about Arkansas. There's a lot of SEC teams who are doing the same thing at quarterback, right? Where it's their first time starting, or at least first time starting in the SEC. So that problem for Kentucky isn't it's a lot of teams which gives me confidence there, but also I trust Will Stein offensively a lot. I trust his evals. And he wanted Minchie enough where he probably pulled some shady strings and just took him from Nebraska when he was already committed. So that eagerness, that need to get a guy like Will Stein immediately tells me this guy's really, really good. Or at least has that ceiling to be really, really good for a guy the caliber of Will Stein to need him that bad. So I trust that he was right there with CJ Carr. I trust what Will Stein sees in him way more than what I see in him, obviously, which are similar things. I think he can be really good. But yeah, the concerns you brought up are obviously fair, right? No starting experience. Now you're in a league like the SEC, which has a ton of really good edge rushers. Mainly the edge class in the SEC this year is really good, which can be really hard for a quarterback. So there are a lot of questions, and they're all fair questions. But I'm on the side of I trust Will Stein's eyes. I trust what he thinks is best for his team. And by default, there, I trust Kenny Minchie.
All right, Bateman is the new defensive coordinator, and according to Will Stein, he has total complete autonomy over the defense. So Sam Green is back, Ty Bryant is back, Marquise Humphrey Grace is back. Everybody else, a lot of transfers. Whether it was Elijah Barnes, whether it was Jamion Harkness, Hassan Sykes, Aaron Gates, Jordan Castell, they hit transfer portal hard. So
Mm-hmm.
again, what should we expect from a Kentucky defense that has some key defenders, but it's a lot of these guys who are like, all right, 8 transfers in front seven, and we still have no idea who some of these starting lineups are going to look like, especially for Kentucky.
Yeah, I have much more questions about their defense than I do their offense. Kind of the one known commodity you have is Ty Bryant back there at safety. He was all SEC second team last fall, started all 12 for the Wildcats. So he's a returner. He's going to be a big part of this defense. And how does he bring together a secondary with guys like Jordan Castell, like you said, Grant Grayton at corner, guys like Terrion Nichols and Aaron Gates there? It's a lot of new, not a ton of experience in that secondary. That worries me. Then coming off the edge, right? Humphrey Grace, 3.5 sacks last year. Not bad. Sam Green, he had a short season because of injury, but he was able to get a sack. Is there pressure on that defensive line? Hey, Jamarian Harkless coming from Purdue. He had 2.5 sacks. Is he able to elevate that from the interior, generate pass rush that way? I have a good bit of questions about their defensive line and just, can someone take that step? At linebacker, can Tavion Wallace be who I think he could be? Can Antoine Smith be who I think he can be, right? It's a lot of that same thing I just said. Can they be who I think they can be? And if the answer is no, then Kenny Minch is going to have to be incredible to win them some games, right? Because it might be a shootout for Kentucky every single week. But there are good enough quality pieces. We're in a perfect storm, which is obviously very hard to predict. But Kentucky's defense can be good. Can they just be serviceable enough so that they can let their offense, be what keeps them in games?
The entire secondary has starting experience. That's the good news. It's
Yeah.
also a lot of people who, as you said, transferred in. They scooped up Jordan Castell, Aaron Gates from Florida. Ty Bryant's the returning safety. The nickel, Hassan Sykes they got as a transfer. Dayon Nichols is returning. Is this a good secondary though, or is this a secondary where it's like, all right, we know they can start and just hopefully they won't be exposed.
Yeah, I mean it's good enough on paper, right? Because you brought up all the starting experience, what they've all done. Not necessarily like a massive difference maker in the secondary, but just a bunch of good players. But we brought it up with Arkansas too. How do they play together? Are they ready to play with a new guy? If you're Ty Bryant, do you trust the guy who's the corner on your side now? If you're the corner, do you trust Jordan Castell there behind you at safety? How do they all work together? That's the question that we're going to have to get the answers to probably in fall camp because I do believe that Kentucky's passing game will test them in August here, which is going to be very good. Obviously, Iron Sharp Iron mentality. The players are good enough where if they find the right combination and they're able to step up, it can be a very good secondary. Are the people, ready to step up and be the number one guy at corner? Who's ready to be there right behind Ty Bryant when he needs to drive on the sideline? Are they ready for that just mentally to be that guy now? Because, guys like Aaron Gates and Castell at Florida last year, they both got a good bit of reps. The secondary wasn't relying on them, though. Are they ready to do that this fall now at Kentucky? That's what remains to be seen. I think really once the season gets going.
As I said, Will Stein is peacocking a bit. He's going, hey, look, we can be the next Indiana. You just look
Mhm.
it up. He is taught. He's giving him a lot of, let's say, bravado, which is good. Is he the next Kurt Signetti, or could he be the next Will Muschamp? Or hey, yeah, you're a great coordinator. We love you, but yeah, head coaching is a lot different. I mean, again, Kentucky fans are excited, but should we pump the brakes on a guy who is 36 years old and he's never been a head coach and he's now entering an SEC where there is a lot of coaches who are probably looking at him going, okay, settle down there here. Go back to the kiddie table, get a juice box. This is the SEC. This isn't, like coaching for Oregon in the Big Ten where you have everything and anything. There are basically levels to this here, son.
Yeah, it can be pretty hard to project, just how real all that is. Right? Like, obviously, you want your coach to be confident, but, when you say it at media days like that, does it make it any more true? I don't necessarily know if it does, but to say that at, the media days, that means that he does truly have that confidence. And if you don't have that vocal in your face confidence, you won't be successful. So at least he has that. How real is it year one? It'll be, we'll have to find out. We'll probably find out pretty early. They host Bama in week 2. That'll be a really good tone setter. But I at least trust that he knows what he's selling in terms of his vision to the administration because it would have been very easy for the Kentucky admin to say, all right, great, we hired you. That's great. We really want to get back to the Final Four in basketball, though. So you're just going to have to take a back seat for a little bit. He was able to get some really good investment to this program, right? With all the transfers he brought in, the staff he was able to hire. So he's selling people in his own building on his vision. That's a great start. He was able to, like I said, go get Kenny Minchie out of the Big Ten from Nebraska and bring him there on a whim. That means something to me. So he's selling his vision very, very well. Now, like you said, could he just be a salesman? There's always that possibility. I'm erring on the side of this guy's going to be a really good coach, right? Because he's been in those rumors as the next coordinator to head coach jump for a while. I trust a guy coming from Dan Lanning, who then in theory is coming from Kirby Smart, right? So he's in that long line of, Saban, Smart, Lanning, now Stein. Can that trend continue? I think it's very possible that it can.
All right, let's call it Sorsby Texas Tech drama. These guys were the biggest villains in college football. That's right. Your LSU Tigers. Oh, they were like the little spoiled rich kid who, oh, you want this? We're going to give it to you in spades. Oh, you want an offensive weapons? Oh yeah, we'll get you everybody from transfer portal from Eugene Wilson to Jace Brown to Trey Brown to come in. Oh, you want a stud quarterback? All right, we're gonna get Sam Levitt. Oh, You want an elite offensive line? Here is Jordan Seaton, who they paid supposedly $3 million for. A top 5 offensive tackle in the NFL draft, possibly next year. How much talent is there on LSU? Could this be the most talented team since Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson back in the day?
Yeah, I mean the roster is just stupid. Right. I mean, we could go on for 4 hours just about how much good talent there is on this LSU team. Between Sam Levitt coming out of the portal, very highly rated. I don't know if I'm there, but he's obviously has a great athletic talent, natural ability. At running back, you bring in Dylan Jones from Wisconsin. He's not a flashy ad. I think he can be really solid, right, with Harlan Berry and Caden Durham. The receiver room, actually, no, I'm looking at that in a second. Trey Green at tight end. I think he's going to be a freak. He already is a freak, obviously at 6'7", 237, but now that it's Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss drawing up plays for him, Trey Dez, I think, can be one of the best tight ends in the country. Rob Jordan at the offensive line. At receiver, you portaled in, I think it was double-digit guys. You have 7 or 8 dudes who are used to being wide receiver 1. That's 2 things. That means 2 things, right? It's a bunch of really quality receivers. It also means that 6 or 7 of them are going to no longer be wide receiver 1. How does that work in the locker room? It remains to be seen. But defensively, I'm actually more excited about their defense than I am their offense, which sounds backwards to say about a Lane Charlie Weiss team, but this defensive line is ridiculous. Prince William coming from Ole Miss, 9 sacks last year. Jordan Ross, former 5-star guy from Tennessee, who was able to get a chase down sack on Taylor Green. D linemen shouldn't be able to do that. They have Lamar Brown, who is the #1 overall prospect in America there, and that D tackle, Deuce Gerald's 5-star. Richard Anderson, 5-star. Malik Blockton from Auburn, Sophie Green from Clemson. The defensive line is like 12 deep with guys who could start this year at most other SEC places. In the secondary, headlined by DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland, Ty Benefield's a superstar. I'm just like rambling out names, but there are so many that you can bring up at every position on this LSU team that you can't fault any LSU fan for being over the moon excited about what this year could bring.
So let's talk about Sam Levitt. That's going to be the question. Like, which one are we getting? Are we getting the guy who, prior to his injury, was the guy people were saying, hey, could be an NFL draft pick and possibly a Heisman candidate? And how tough is it where it's like, all right, he spent much of the offseason recovering from November foot surgery, where, as you said, we're still trying to figure out, he missed spring ball. Like, we're not panicking, but again, like, what are realistic expectations for a quarterback who hasn't played since, basically last October?
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard regardless, right? Like you just brought up, he's coming back then. It's even harder when you miss spring camp, transferring up to a new conference, a new head coach, a new OC, double-digit new receivers. Everything is brand new. So the reports today from Baton Rouge that he looked really mobile and really healthy in day 1 of fall camp, and that's fine. But his timing still wasn't perfect, right? He's still getting used to everything. That is something that does worry me a little bit. And looking back at his games against SEC teams throughout his career. Now, this is only a 3-game sample size. Obviously, he's had really good games. He's looked great. Against Mississippi State in 2024, he was 10 of 20 passing for less than 70 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Last year, against that same Mississippi State team, 10 of 22, 82 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. That is a sub 50% completion rate, less than 200 yards in 2 games against probably the worst team in the SEC over the last 2 years. And in that Peach Bowl against Texas, he played better, right? 24-46 for little over 200 yards, still no scores, 1 interception, and the best throw in that game, I kind of think, was made by Cam Scatterbo. So sure, he had better numbers there. He threw 46 passes, just barely broke 200 yards. I have not liked what I've seen from Levitt against SEC teams. And you could point to, oh, well, he was on ASU. He had Jordan Tyson and Cam Scatterbo. He had 2 NFL players there at receiver, 1 at running back. So, yes, the overall roster is better. He still had NFL talent on those offenses with him, and it wasn't quite working. So I do have questions about what he can actually do against SEC defenses, at least week in, week out. And I have the concerns, how much time does he need to get ready for this season? Is it enough just in fall camp? I'm willing to come. I am concerned about Sam Levitt at LSU this year. I am worried about it. Now, the last time that Lane Kiffin put on a bad quarterback is, I don't know when. I don't know if that's ever happened. So there's some blind faith there. Levitt's got some question marks for me that I can't quite shake until I see him do it.
can the secondary hold up? Because last year you had Mansour Delane who could basically blanket an
Hmm.
entire one half of field. They still have PJ Woodland coming back. Tremarcus Corley is back. I know people are raving about DJ Pickett and Ty Benefield, but is this secondary good enough where when they play Texas and Alabama, and especially teams like Old Miss and Texas A&M, but they won't get just thrown on because all of a sudden the lane's not there. Oh well, we're not have to worry about that one guy who can just shut
Hmm.
down the entire side of the field.
The starters are good enough. DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland as your 1-2 at corner, they are good enough. Ty Benefield at safety, backed up by Cooley, maybe Fahim Delane, another Delane there. They might be good enough. The depth is what scares me because they already lost a guy at safety to a torn Achilles during the spring. And at corner, you get behind Pickett and PJ Woodland. I mean, Jakeem Jackson, who had 84 snaps last year. I don't know if I trust him very much against these guys in the SEC. Deshaun Spears as a junior, Michael Turner as a redshirt sophomore. These guys haven't done it yet. And at that safety room, right, between Cooley and Delane at safety number two, I don't know if anyone really has that edge there. And then Jace Thomas is a redshirt freshman. You got 9 games against SEC teams, and you open against Clemson, whose receiver room is awesome. Can any of these guys in the secondary actually give you 12 games? Just because of how grueling the schedule is, how demanding it's going to be week in and week out. And if they can't, who steps into their place? If we lived in a video game world where we knew that every single game it was Pickett, Woodland, and Benefield at 100% in that secondary, I would have a hard time finding a reason to be worried about it. Knowing what is coming this season in terms of the wear and tear on those three guys, I definitely have a couple of concerns about their secondary, the depth of it, and just how healthy can they stay. And if they're not healthy, can they get thrown on a bit? If some of those guys go down or aren't 100%.
All right. People in LSU are expecting national championship. Maybe this year, maybe, but definitely next year.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we want this year. But yet, you look at that schedule. It starts off hard, and it starts off Clemson. Then, oh yeah, you get a break with Louisiana Tech. Then, at Old Miss, yeah, they're not going to hold a grudge. Then Texas A&M, and then you get a little bit, McNeese, and then it's at Kentucky, Mississippi State, at Auburn, Alabama, Texas, at Tennessee, at Arkansas. If they go, let's say, dare I say, like 8-3, 8-4 their first 12 games, will sky fall apart? Will people start going, oh my god, this really team sucks? Lane Kiffin, oh, you sold us a bill of goods. Oh, we're getting sued. Oh, fire Lane Kiffin. Start that chant, fire Lane Kiffin, because again, the fans are expecting miracles and Christmas every day, and you're looking going, yeah, they have a lot of talent, but this is still everybody's gonna gun for them. Everybody hates them, and well, this SEC is just loaded for bear.
Yeah, I mean, no matter which way it goes, whether it's great or not so great for LSU, there's obviously going to be more talk on them than everybody else just because of the storyline of this year, Lane Kiffin being who Lane is. I I have them going 8-4 in my preseason. That's what I have them doing. I think the schedule is hard. I talked about what I'm worried about with Sam Levitt. There is a Sky Falls scenario though. And why I say that is because Sam Levitt was hurt last year. He was. I think it's fair to say to a certain degree he kind of quit on Arizona State. And you look at this whole roster for LSU. Yeah, they're all happy to be there. They all want to be there. They're not at LSU this year, all these transfer players, because they love LSU. They're at LSU because Lane Kiffin is the head coach. They were given a blank check and the promise that you're going to be on maybe the most talented roster in America. So when LSU loses maybe their second game or maybe their third game, and let's say the playoffs are out of reach, I don't really know why I'm supposed to believe that they're still going to be playing their best football at that point. I mean, what if Sam Levitt opts out after maybe if they lose again to Alabama and says, we're not going to make the playoff. I want to go be an NFL quarterback. I don't want to get hurt again. What if the receiver room does the same thing? I think, I don't mean this to question the character of the LSU guys, but they are all mercenaries this year. They are not playing for LSU because it's LSU. They're playing for LSU because of the check and Lane Kiffin and their teammates. And just the potential of those teammates. If the sky falls apart, could this team fall apart and maybe you just like lose your last 4 games of the year? because they're hard anyways, right? Bama, Texas, you have to go to Neyland, and that last game at Arkansas, if no one's playing, Arkansas will want to win that game against you to set the tone for next year. There is a sky falling scenario for LSU if they are out of the playoff race in like week 11 or 12. That would cause a lot of noise, right? And the natty or bust talk, that's all, I mean, clickbait by the media. No team is ever really truly natty appearance or bust. Right, like maybe Texas is this year, maybe Oregon is this year, but that's not really a standard for a first year head coach. And Lane is preaching that. Lane is saying, he's like slipping it in press conferences like patience, right? Like nothing's ever overnight. I think LSU is going to be good this year. I don't think that they're championship ready this year, and I don't predict it, but there is a sky falls apart, team quits scenario that could cause a ton of noise, just given the fact that this is like, they're not really, I mean, there are a bunch of transfers this year, mercenaries, who they get along with each other, but they're not, this is not like the third or fourth year in the system. They don't love LSU. They love their situation. That could cause some bad things if the season does go poorly.
Well, we go from one team that's expected everything to a team which we're trying to figure out what they are. There's some hope, but people are like, all right, well, there's a lot of talent, but can they pull it off? That's Mississippi State. Before he got injured, Fluff Bothwell was one of the best stories in college football. Had a great start to 2025, and that team was doing well. They started off 4-0. People were going, hey, yes, they turned it around. Then he got injured, the bottom fell out, and everything was like, oh crap. Well, they're a plucky team, but all right, they are what they are. Now, let's start off with a big question: can Fluff Bothwell stay healthy, and can he be the best running back in the SEC?
I hope so. He's a lot of fun to watch, but the depth behind him isn't great. So I'm worried he's going to get a lot of carries, and it's just going to be hard to be 100%, maybe even go out there for all 12 games. So I really hope we get all the fluff we can get. Xavier Gayton, Colin Wilson behind him. I don't know if those guys can get enough carries, get enough quality carries to really take a couple off of Bothwell's plate. So I am a little worried about his durability again this year for Fluff. But I mean, him and Kamario Taylor are one of the most electric backfields in the country, right? Because of what Taylor can do as a pure athlete here. Reminds me a good bit of Taylon Green and just that game breaking potential from last year. So him and Fluff, I think, are a really good 1-2. You have Anthony Evans, they're at receiver, who's just a lethal downfield threat. So there are plenty of individual pieces on this Mississippi State offense that I'm really pumped about. As a unit, right, can anyone outside of those three guys really keep contributing? That remains to be seen. Fluff is definitely the driving force. I'm a little worried about, is he going to be overrun almost by necessity to then where we get some health concerns again towards the end of the year?
Last year, Kamario Taylor won a couple of SEC Freshman of the Year, Freshman of the Week awards.
Mm-hmm.
He has much more returning starters. The entire receiver room. It's Anthony Evans III, Marquise Johnson. They're all coming back. They brought in a ton of transfers in the offensive line. Miles McVay, DJ Chester, LJ Prudhomme, Isaiah Dent. And Cannon Boone is returning. So, can this offensive line hold up? Can this be an offensive line where last year was inconsistent? This year could be, dare I say, a strength.
I hope so, because the way the Kamara Taylor is going to play, he is going to take some hits. Right, so you're okay with him getting knocked around, when he's running the ball, when he's making plays for you. You're much less okay with him taking hits when when your left guard blows an assignment. So it's incredibly important for those five guys to be solid. Obviously, he will get sacked, but at both guard spots, you bring over transfers. Chester from LSU, Pruno from Arkansas. I like Chester more than I do like LJ. We'll see how he turns out. Cannon Boone is huge, bringing him back at center like you brought up. At tackle, a guy like Blake Stein had a season-ending injury in the opener last year. How, when he comes back, sure, maybe he's healthy. Is he fully 100% though? Is he really ready to go? So I have a couple of questions about this offensive line, some certain players, but they're incredibly important to keeping Kamario upright and try to not let him take unnecessary hits, especially when they're sacks and for loss.
Defense. All right, let's get to it here. If it's They last year they were so bad, but people are like, "Oh my god, they couldn't stop a cold." So they brought back Zach Arnett as defensive coordinator. They have Kelly Jones and Isaac Smith, who Both of them are solid NFL draft picks here. Is the secondary of a strength, and how much of a front seven is like, all right, well, hopefully somebody can get some pressure. Hopefully, we're not sure who, but hey, hopefully we can get some pressure on the quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, I mean, secondary is a massive strength, right? Jones and Smith, you brought them up. They're superstars. Quentin Taylor at corner coming over from Iowa, I think can also be a big time playmaker. But man, secondary to a certain extent only as good as your front seven. I mean, are the receivers going to have forever to get open, or can a guy like a Mary Williams at edge get pressure? He's coming over from Florida State. He played both D end and tight end with the Knowles last year because they're just trying things in Tallahassee. He's now focusing on defensive end. I think he can be much better. Will Whitson at edge. He is a graduate. He had a season-ending injury in game 2 last year, but in a game and a half, he had 3.5 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. He he's a monster, right? He has the monster-like potential, but how healthy is he coming off a season-ending injury? So you have some good players there at edge. Dylan Evans at D tackle coming over from Texas A&M, but can they? A lot of it with those three guys is if this and if that, they can be great. If those ifs become, yeses, that's not a phrase, but if those ifs turn out great, yeah, they can be really good players. I have some questions about this front seven. I think that this defense for state really is Kelly Jones, Isaac Smith, and then a bunch of other guys, right? As opposed to a bunch of studs or some other names we can really point to. So I am worried about it in that regard. But a guy like Will Whitson does have the potential to work really well in tandem with that secondary to cause some havoc. But we'll see how it turns out.
So again, with Mississippi State, if the question is, well, they have talent, can they stay healthy? Because
Yeah.
again, last year they were talk early. Hey, 4-0, they beat Arizona State. Fluff is everything, and the kitchen sink. But as you said, injuries piled up, and then all of a sudden everything went to hell in a handbasket. So what is realistic? Can they finally get the winning season? Can they finally go to a bowl game where they have more than 6 wins, or is this still a team where it's like they don't have the finances to compete in an SEC where you better have a lot of money because everything costs a lot?
Yeah, you look at Mississippi State last year, even when they had all those in Tennessee, Texas, and Florida were all one score games. So they were in theory, 4 or 5 plays away from going 8-4 last year in the regular season and making a really good bowl game and having a really promising, future here. Now, obviously, that's all that'd be versus history, but they were not that far away for last year than it seems like they were. Where you lose the Mayo Bowl to Wake Forest, like it seems like it's another Mississippi State year. They were really close to beating some really good teams. So, you bring back a guy like Fluff. Kamario Taylor is definitely a better quarterback than Blake Shapen. If the defense is able to pan out, I think they're 7-5 is definitely within reach, maybe even 8-4 if you're able to take care of your home slate, go win a road game against an iffy team. They weren't that far last year. I think pound for pound, their roster a little bit better this year. So the ceiling is 7-5, maybe even 8-4. We talked about it a bunch. I am worried about their health just because of how much they're going to rely and call on specific players. So then can they actually do it for 12 weeks? I just don't know. Their ceiling is really good. Their depth worries me. Therefore, injuries worry me. So I'm just not sure if they can get there.
I've run out of things to say about this kid. In fact, most people say Ahmad Hardy might be the greatest running back. This guy named Herschel Walker came out of college football, and I know that's saying a lot. But last year he literally teams stacked the front seven. What do you do? Oh yeah, well, he still basically helped combine for 2,402 yards rushing, 22 touchdowns, along with Jamal Roberts. Uh, Many people are saying, hey, if he had challenged for to go in the NFL draft early, nobody would bat an eye. Can he do, is there going to be an encore? Because right now he's the greatest. You could say this is a Disney story waiting to happen. He gets shot, he recuperates, he's coming back. How much pressure is going to be on this guy to basically carry an offense where new quarterback, new wide receiver room, and everybody thinks, oh, Ahmad Hardy can do anything and everything, even though it's like, man, I got to run this kid into the ground possibly.
Yeah, there's a lot around Hardy, this whole context situation. So just in the running back room to start, right? Excuse me. Jamal Roberts as their number two, he could start almost anywhere else in the country. So you're immediately off to a better start than most places who lose their running back, one, because of how good Roberts can be. They also ported up Zyshawn Edwards from Houston Christian. Now, coming from Houston Christian, that's what it is. He was over 1,000 yards last year, had 3 games over 100 yards, so he also knows how to, kind of carry an offense. So I think that if for the beginning of the year, you start off with just Roberts and Edwards as your 1-2, you're not too far back in Missouri. And for Hardy this year, just we got a quote from Drinkwitz from Fall Camp this year about his status. This is what he said, quote, "He will not be a participant in practice this week, but he will be a participant in rehab and walkthroughs as we continue just to get him acclimated back to what it would take to play football." What that quote tells me is that he is not going to play against Arkansas Pine Bluff to open. He probably won't play against Kansas in week 2, and he probably won't play against Troy in week 3. Can you get him back for SEC play when they host Mississippi State in week 4? That, I think, is your threshold because you have good running backs around him where you can even ease him back, right? Just, we're going to give you 5 carries against Mississippi State because we think we can just beat them outright. And I don't even think that the running game is going to have to carry Missouri this year because Austin Simmons is leaps and bounds ahead of Bo Pabula in terms of arm talent. I think the receiver room, they bring back Donovan Alugbade, transferring some great guys. I think the offense as a whole for Missouri, I'm so excited about this offense where it takes a lot of pressure off Hardy to A, just carry the offense, but B, rush himself back, right? Because you need to make sure that you're right after any injury, especially getting shot in the leg. So I don't think there's that much pressure or that much rush already to get back because of how good the other running backs are in that room for Missouri, but also just what you can rely on Austin Simmons to do that maybe you couldn't rely on Bo Prabula to do.
Could this be the best offensive line in all the SEC? You got Caden Green at left tackle. You got transfer Josh Atkins, who was all all Big 12 at right tackle. You got Dominic Gudis, Curtis Pleger returning. You've got Zach Owens transferring in. I mean, again, this is a pretty damn good offensive line. Could this be the best right now? Does this help? With Hardy and Roberts and Simmons, knowing they have guys who can block almost anything in the SEC.
Yeah, this offensive line is stupid. I mean, the youngest guy on this offensive line is Caden Green, who is a senior with tons of starting potential, and he's probably the guy with the biggest NFL upside. He's the youngest one on this offensive line. There are 3 redshirt seniors and 1 graduate who are alongside of him. Now, the only question is with Josh Atkins because he had a bit of a setback to an injury in the spring. He should be fine at some point, but they might be working with right tackle 2 to open the year, which is a problem because you have a lefty quarterback in Austin Simmons. But like I said, that schedule opens up Arkansas Pine Bluff at Kansas, which is kind of a big wild card. I'm not sure how good they really are, but they also could be dangerous. And then Troy. So your first 3 games aren't that bad. That gives Atkins time to come back. But this O line, to your point, I don't know what the weakness is. That's not getting injured and losing guys, right? Setting the pocket for Simmons, run blocking for those running backs to keep them, from getting not even just a bunch of hits, but just like you don't let a D tackle effectively punch at the ball, right? So then you get, fist to your ribs or your arm. You can try and help avoid that because of how good this O line is. I think it probably is one of the best in the SEC. I think you nailed it there. When they're all healthy, this might be the best unit in the conference, and it's going to just help that offense so much when it comes to giving Simmons time to throw and giving those running backs lanes to just avoid hits at the line of scrimmage and get deep.
All right, people, we gave you the sunshine and rainbows. Now we got to get you the downpour. Zion Young is gone. Damon Wilson II transferred to Miami, those bastards. Chris McClellan, gone. Jeremiah Trotter, gone. This entire defense basically lost 11 defenders who started 7 games or more, including, as we said, the Big Four. They brought in transfers from like Jaleel Florence and Robert Woodyard Jr. and Chris Graves, all of them from big power programs that won, but still, what is this defense going to look like? And right now, if you are Corey Baton, how much are you looking at this going, all right, well, could be a long season.
Yeah, so the good news for that is because of because of how highly I think of Missouri's offense, and assuming that's right, this defense only needs to be fine for Missouri to have a really good year. And you brought up Robert Woodyard there coming in at linebacker. I don't think he can be who Trotter was, but I think he can be really damn good. I mean, he was first team All SEC from PFF last year, had 7 TFLs and 2 sacks. He's a really violent, big player. And coming off the edge, right? Because this to me is their biggest question. Replacing Young, replacing Wilson. Darius Smith, when I clocked this in, I wrote this down in the spring when I was doing my previews, but he was 6'5", 240. He had played in all 13 last year, all that. He put on 20 plus pounds of good weight to Darius Smith. So he is physically much more the part than he was in the spring. That entire D line did. Out of fall camp, people are raving about the size of this defensive line. So obviously, weighing yourself is one thing, playing football is another, but it's a massive step in the right direction towards replacing what Young and Wilson did. Now, will it be as good as those two guys? I think it'd be irresponsible to say yes, but if it can be just decent, if it can just be a little bit, what it was last year, you'll still be in a good spot. And you brought up Chris Graves there at corner. He's a really good shutdown guy. I don't really know who the second corner is, though. I mean, is it Siona Leia from Oregon? He only played in 6 games last year for Oregon. Jaleel Florence is a redshirt senior, only played in 2 last season. The secondary, mainly at corner, there's safeties I trust a little bit more. There's some more experience there in the safety room. The corners I have questions about, which then puts even more pressure right on Darius Smith, laying the kitchen there at the edge to not make them cover for more than 3 seconds. So the defense, I do have a good bit of questions. I think they'll have some answers for me, but it only needs to be fine to serviceable if this Missouri offense can be as good as people think that it can be.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Last year, many people said they should have been probably 7-1 of the SEC. You could argue even if everything, at least went decent. 12-1. Yeah, but they couldn't kick a field goal, save your life. Again, Blake Craig got injured toward his ACL in the season opener, and then it was like missing 20-yard field goals, 50-yard field goals. I mean, at some point, I think Eli Drinkwitz was ready to just start yanking hair out and executing kickers because he was so pissed. Can Blake Craig stay healthy? And is there a plan? If not, because again, in a season where, as you said, it can sometimes games can come down to less than 3 points, which we saw last year with Bama, Vandy, Oklahoma, Virginia. Like, all right, goddamn, if we can't make a field goal, we're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, right? In theory, you don't lose a kicker to a season-ending injury 2 years in a row. It's wild enough to lose him once. If you lose him twice, at that point, if you're Drinkwitz, you probably just go into like banking or something. But I'm going to assume that Blake Craig is able to stay healthy. Like you said, just the simplest thing of just being able to make a 40-yard field goal that could swing you a playoff berth. So then, down the line, it could swing you, if you're Drinkwitz, your job. So yes, kicking is obviously that incredibly important. Blake Craig, for all intents and purposes here, I'm going to assume that he does stay healthy. He only kicked in the opener last year, but he made all 5 kicks he put up, right? It was 2 field goals and 3 extra points, so little baby sample size, but you get him back. You have a kicker you trust at least a little bit more. It will be able to set the tone, right? Because then Missouri offense, you get to the 35, that's fine. We think we can score from here. It just makes everything so much easier. It takes late game pressure off of everybody, knowing you can make a kick. So as long as that kicking game is better, which, law of averages says it will be because you'll have Craig back, that'll plug a big time hole in their late game situation, their late game strategy, and, go help Missouri, maybe win games down to the wire versus A&M, maybe on the road against Georgia, on the road against Ole Miss. Some really big time swing games for their season that might come down to a kick. You get Craig back, all of a sudden those losses might turn to wins.
So, what does success look for Missouri? Because again, it's as I said, they're holding out. Ahmad Hardy for the first probably 3 games. Probably won't play till at Mississippi State. They're going to be the story that everybody wants to see. Hey, can Ahmad Hardy survive a gunshot and come back? Hey, can this team from Missouri just, shatter expectations? And can Austin, Simmons get basically a second chance? What's realistic? Is it 8-5? Could they go maybe 10-3? Like, what's realistic for Missouri considering their defense is basically more questions than answers on their offense?
Yes, I mean, so their win total is 6.5. I'm sitting 9-3 for Missouri. I think this offense is that good. Defense is just fine enough where they can win a ton of games. Now, those 3 losses I have are far and away their hardest games. It's at Ole Miss, at Georgia, and versus Texas. So I think for Missouri, right, a successful year is probably going Yeah, successful is probably like about 8-4, but really those three games you can afford to lose. But if you take care of the rest of your business, you go 9-3. You won't make the playoff, but you'll be a really good team. It'll be a great year for Eli. The defense can probably improve to next year. You'll lose some pieces on offense, but that's probably a good year. But there's definitely a scenario where Missouri is able to go 10-2 and make the playoff this year. Between, at Ole Miss with the coaching change, what do they really look like? You never really know. That game could be winnable. At Georgia, we talked about how their offense might be not super explosives. That game could be winnable. Texas at home, who knows what they look like on the road. All three of those games, there's a scenario where they can win if Missouri is as good as I think they can be. So they can definitely make the playoff. I look at success at 8-4, 9-3. You lose those games, but you take care of the rest of your business, things like that. Their ceiling is very high. Their floor is pretty high as well to me, but I think Missouri could easily be a fringe playoff team, maybe even get in when we get to the end of the year.
All right, every podcaster's favorite GM, Jim Nagy. He basically came in, helped turn Oklahoma around. John Mateer, the whole gang, even guys like Taylor Wine, David Stone. Last year they went 10-3, and despite losing to Texas after Mateer got injured, they still made it all the way to the first round of the NCAA college football playoffs. Let's start off with the big question here. The defense is the key. It's Taylor Wine. It's David Stone. Can this defense, continue to be a monster? Which last year they only allowed 15 and a half points per game, 272 yards per game, and they basically shut people down like basically it was on lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is going to be very good, right? You kind of just have some blind trust in what Brent Venables can do. They returned so many great players on the side of the ball. There is definitely something, though, to the caliber of offense that they actually held low last season. Now, obviously, last year is last year, this year is this year, but you return a bunch of those same players, so there's some continuity there, right? I mean, they held Auburn to 17. Great. You held Carolina to 7. Awesome. Ole Miss gave you 34, in Norman. Tennessee gave you 27 with Joey Aguilar, who was very turnover prone. So the better offenses they played last year did get to them in ways that you didn't really expect, at least pregame. Could that happen again this year? Maybe, but the defensive roster is there, right? I mean, you brought up David Stone, one of the best D tackles in the country. Bringing back Owen Heineke to that eligibility battle was massive. I think their secondary guys like Corton Guillory back for his sophomore year, so the defense will be very good. My question is, can they turn that very good into really good showings against the better offenses that they play? Can they hold the Ole Misses of this year to 24 instead of 34? Because that will make a massive difference. Obviously, it's 10 points. So can you not only be great against the fine teams on your schedule, can that translate to dominant performances against some of the best playmakers in the SEC? That's my biggest defensive question for him this fall.
We'll go back to the defense in a second, but the offense, they loaded up. They went, okay, we need to get more weapons for John Mateer. So what did they do? They went out and got Trell Harris. They went out and stole Parker Livingston. They brought in Mackenzie Aline to help with Isaiah Satenia. They brought in Hayden Hansen and Rocky Beers at tight end. As one opposing SEC coach said, John Mateer has a ridiculous high ceiling. The offense is answers for everything. I know we talked about LSU having a silly, offensive talent, but does Oklahoma almost can they match them in terms of just offensive talent?
It's really good. It's definitely not as recognized as it should be among the league. There's definitely a gap between, the top offenses in the SEC and Oklahoma. But you brought up the receiver ads. This receiver room was great with Livingston, Trell Harris, Satania. I think Elaine can be a really good sticky gadget guy. And the running back room, Xavier Robinson and Torrey Blaylock, they were both there last year. And this Oklahoma running game was notoriously miserable last fall. But Blaylock, he was still SEC all freshman, so he's back for his second year. Can he raise his ceiling a little bit? They bring in Lloyd Avant from Colorado State for some extra help. I said it about Alabama's offensive line. I think it's the same thing for Oklahoma's running game. They have zero incentive to not do all they can to make it better. And I believe that their coaches are smart enough to do that. So I think that Robinson and Blaylock, they will have better years running the ball. If Mateer, I mean, it is so easily forgotten, it seems, that this guy was the front runner for the Heisman last year before he had screws put in his throwing hand. Screws in the throwing hand make it real hard to play quarterback at a high level. If he's able to just stay healthy, I'm not saying he'll win the Heisman this year, but he will show you that player again. He can be that good. So Oklahoma's offense, as long as they stay healthy, that running game does take a step forward. It can be really dangerous.
Could the offensive line improve from last year? I mean, granted, they have people coming back. Michael Fasusi is back at left tackle. They have Ryan Foodie back at right guard. Both of those guys are now sophomores, no longer freshmen. But you've got Jake Makua at returning at center. They brought in, as we said, transfer Marion Harris at right tackle. Can they be just good? I mean, we're not asking for great, but could this
Mhm.
offensive line be good so that they can improve on the 3.5 yards per carry last year?
I think they should be right. I mean, you brought up Fasusi. He was a first All American last year. You can expect he takes another jump, wants even more. It's still pretty young, right? Like Eddie Pierre Lewis, he's back sophomore year. He got some pretty good experience last fall. He should take that step forward too. Then the other three guys are experienced, right? Mykula, Ozeta, Harris. They're all redshirt juniors or above, so at least their fourth year in college. That experience will come with better play. Your younger guys on the left side should just take that step forward. They're thrown to the fire. Now they're burned and they're ready to go. It should take a step forward, which will obviously do two things, right? It'll help that running game develop a little more and just keep Mateer upright because he wants to run. He loves getting hit, probably more than Venables and Arbuckle want him to. So you need to protect him. You need to keep him upright in the pocket you can, so you can try and get 12 games out of Mateer. The O line should take a step forward, just because of those younger guys who clearly have star potential. They'll have that extra year under their belt, and you have plenty of experience elsewhere that will just help strengthen and solidify at least the floor for that unit.
So here's sort of a weird question. Oklahoma could be better, but they could have a worse record because you look at the schedule and it's at Michigan the second week of in college football, at Georgia September 26th. Then after that, oh, it's the Red River Shootout game against Texas, and then later on at Florida, at Missouri, Texas A&M to sort of and Ole Miss to end the season here. Again, this is a team that last year they were ahead of schedule, you could argue, and it saved Brent Venables' job. But could this be a team where it's like even if everything goes well, they're still 7-5 because that is a ridiculous schedule.
It is funny you said that. That's exactly what I have had written down all summer long. I think Oklahoma's a better team. I have them going 7-5 for everything you just said. Right? I mean, you get Michigan and Georgia in the first 4 weeks of the year, so that can go one of two ways, right? Either they're not ready or you're not ready. That could be really volatile. They could be 4-0 or they could be 2-2 going into their early bye week. And nothing would really shock me that much. But also with that early bye week in week 4, that means they're one of a few teams in this conference play 8 straight to end the year. That sucks. I mean, the wear and tear of college football in general is bad. In the SEC, it's bad. On game 8 of an 8 straight stretch, it's horrible. So I think the wear and tear toward the end of the year, it could just cause an extra loss or two. That maybe against a team they might be better than. But I think you nailed it. I think Oklahoma is probably better than they were last year, at least on paper. I I'm not sure they go back to the playoff. I think it's 7-5 just because of the murderer's row they play, but also just the spots that they're getting specific teams in. And it's brutal.
Well, speaking of if they can get back, can Ole Miss get back? And it starts with Keywan Lacey. Look, it's no surprise he last year was the most complete running back from start to finish in the SEC. He actually went to the playoffs. He Doak Walker finalist, 1,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. Told Lane Kiffin, "You go to hell. I'm staying here at Ole Miss." To which the state of Mississippi almost threw a parade. He's back. Trinidad Chambliss is back, but there's a lot of questions at wide receiver. There's some questions at both tackles because they have transfers coming in. So again, can Keywan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss be the Batman Robin of Ole Miss?
I mean, they definitely have the ability to. I am definitely worried about what happens without Lane Charlie Weiss there. Now, what the biggest pushback I've gotten from Ole Miss fans on that is, well, they did in the playoff last year, right? They beat Georgia. Beat Tulane doesn't matter, but they beat Georgia, almost beat Miami. That's not the same as a full offseason of now Pete Golding as the head man, John David Baker as your OC, implementing their stuff. It's just not, right? They were still running Lane and Weiss's offense last year in the playoff. They were. How does it look now when maybe things are going poorly? You no longer have Landon Weiss there. Instead, what is John David Baker able to say? What adjustments can he make? Does the offense have the ceiling they had last year this year? I don't think that they do. And that's not even meant to be, necessarily a dig at David Baker or the staff there right now. But Lane and Charlie Weiss are who they are for a reason. And it's because people can't replicate what they did. And I don't believe that Ole Miss's offensive staff can replicate what those two did. So will the offense for Ole Miss be bad? No. The players are too good for it to be bad. I do believe it's probably less explosive or less consistent, just some mix of those two things where it's just not quite as dynamic. But obviously, Chambliss and Lacey will still have great years. They're good enough players for that. I do think as a whole, though, Ole Miss's offense will take a bit of a step back. Not to, mediocrity or anything, but I don't believe it's as elite as it was last season.
All right, so let's start with the offensive line. The good news is both guards and center are back. Then it's now questions. So, like, Karius Kearney has talent. Can you put together? He's a redshirt sophomore transfer. Then they got Tommy Kinsler the fourth, a transfer. Can both these guys hang? Can they basically play just good in the SEC? Because again, as you mentioned, it's Chambliss, it's Lacey. These guys ought to run around. The wide receiver room is a lot of questions. So again, can this offensive line hold up?
It's going to be a big question, right? Because I brought up, I forget which team we're on, but the depth of edge rush and pass rushers in the SEC this year is big time. So if these tackles aren't ready, whether it's Karius Kern, also Therese Davis, another name there in that tackle room as a sophomore coming from Maryland, um, it's paramount, right? Because Chambliss is incredible. You've seen him make magical plays when he was under pressure scrambling. He can't do it all the time because nobody can. And if the offensive line gets pushed back, Keywan Lacey all of a sudden has to take an extra beat to find a gap. He gets hit in the backfield. The effectiveness goes down. I don't think the offensive line, again, is going to be a weakness. I believe it could be weaker than last year. So then you just, all of a sudden, there's a bottle cap on the explosive that Chambliss can do with his arm and with his legs, right? Can Keywan really go for, 200 yards in a game again if he's getting hit at the line way more often? I just think it'll bottleneck the offense a little more than we did last year. So Ole Miss is going to be forced to be a little more methodical, a little more patient, and just better at dealing with frustration of getting stopped. And that goes back to my question of, can the staff there be as good or better than Lane and Charlie Weiss were when that was happening? And my answer is I don't think so. So the offensive line is some concerns. It won't be bad. It won't be weak, but I don't know if it's strong enough to propel this offense to where they want to be or where they expect to be this year.
Pete Golding's very happy with his defense right now.
Yeah.
It's Will Eccles and Cam Franklin. Just on the front line is just a monster enough. And then they got in Jordan Renard and Michael Borio to transfer in. They stole Luke Varelli from Clemson. They brought in Keaton Thomas, the other linebacker. Suntarine Perkins is back. Oh, the secondary? Oh, yeah. Anton Kite and Jalen Braxton are back. And then they brought in high transfers, Edwin Joseph from Florida State and Jalen Crawford from Auburn. Is this going to be basically the defense basically controls the game and the offense just relies on them?
I do think so. I think it's like a full 180 from what they look under Lane, right? Where it was the offense is going to keep scoring points. If the defense gets a stop, that's great. I do think it flips the other way now with Golding as the head man, right? I mean, this defensive talent is awesome. You brought up all the transfers, all the returners. It's a really good two deep. And with Golding now in charge, I mean, he's a great D coordinator. The defense is going to still be under his control, at least mostly. It's going to be a really good unit. So I do think you look at Ole Miss, even with Chambliss and Lacey on that offense, and kind of say, like, all right, the defense is probably going to be a relative strength for Ole Miss this year. And that sounds crazy because of how erroneous it would have sounded for the past 6 years. But I think that you're right. I think that that's just what you're going to get with the coaching change, with the philosophy shift, where Ole Miss's defense is going to have more pressure on them to opposing offenses below their average points for Ole Miss to go win tough games. So the personnel is there, the staff is there. I do think you get a really good defense out of Ole Miss this year.
Everybody's rooting for Pete Golding. That you could tell that team loved him. A lot of them came back. So again, I hate saying this, and Ole Miss fans might come and just tie me up and beat me with a rubber hose. Could they have a losing record? I mean, again, starts off with Louisville, then September 19th, LSU. Yeah, there's not going to be any emotion in that game. Yeah, no, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then after that, you got to go at Florida, and then at Vanderbilt. all right, maybe you beat Vanderbilt because they're rebuilding. We'll get to them, but then Missouri comes to Ole Miss, and then it's just at Texas, Auburn, Georgia, at Oklahoma. We get Wilford, and then Mississippi State again. We have no idea if Pete Golden can handle when things go bad, and there might be days where things go bad. Last year, they were basically even the loss in the playoffs came down to the last play, and you could argue they overachieved. Could this be the year where just again everything was magical last year? So that means law of averages, everything's not going to be magical this year.
I think you're on something there. I mean, their win total is at 7.5, and that feels crazy low for a team that really retained a bunch of their stars. Jefferson lost some guys to LSU and to other places, but they retained Chambliss, Lacey. You have a good defense behind them. That win total to the casual fan looks like, oh my goodness, I just need Ole Miss and try not to go 8-4 to make my money. That's great. During the season, we're going to talk a lot about point spreads that make no sense because books want money from casual people who just want to throw money at the sport at the books. I think this could maybe be a similar thing where the over just looks so easy. And those first four games, you brought it up. Louisville, Charlotte's fine, LSU at Florida. Why couldn't they go 1-3 to start the year? They could, right? Jeff Brom as a head coach versus Pete Golding. I want to take Brom. He's been doing it at a high level, and Louisville's got a good roster. That game against LSU, does the emotion get the best of them? Is LSU just too talented? Then you have to go to Gainesville, to Florida, a Gators team under Summerall that wants to send a message. They lost a heartbreaker to the Rebels last year. They want revenge. 1-3 is not impossible. So then they also have that early bye week, like Oklahoma. So let's say you go into your bye in week 4. We'll just say 2-2. Maybe things aren't going so well. You're 2-2. Then you have to get into that stretch of 8 straight games where you are getting beat up. You are exhausted. You don't get a break. There is definitely a bottom out chaos scenario for the Rebels where just all those losable games, Louisville, LSU, Florida, Missouri, Texas, Georgia, at Oklahoma, all those games are losable. They're all tough. What if they lose? They could lose a bunch of one-score games maybe because let's say their offense can't quite hold up. The O line lets up a crucial sack. They play enough tough teams where if Golding isn't ready as a head coach to guide his team to a bunch of one-score, gritty, high-pressure wins, they could stack some losses against some bad teams. So I'd be shocked if it's a losing record. But like you said, as you talk yourself through their schedule, through potential Golding questions, it quickly becomes not impossible, which is kind of wild to think about. But the win total being where it is, looking at their schedule, looking at the potential questions, there is definitely a chaos scenario where Ole Miss is not a contender in the SEC or for the playoff this year.
All right, this is the you could argue the $35 million question. Which Lenore Sellers do we get? Do we get the 2020 4 version where he was in the talk for some at one point the Heisman, he was balling out. People are like, hey, Lenore Sellers, Heisman 2025, book it. Hey, maybe number one pick, or do we get the 2025 Lenore Sellers where there were some games he looked great and some games the footwork was horrible. He's throwing bad interceptions, and we're going, oh my God, what the hell happened? Did somebody take over his body? So for those who don't know, like, what did South Carolina do in the offseason to basically A, keep Lenore Sellers from going to the NFL draft or transferring out, and B, help him become a better quarterback? Because last year got ugly.
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with what they didn't do. And what they didn't do was get him any help at running back. They return less than 500 rushing yards in their running back room. Excuse me, right around 500 yards in their running back room. That's just really bad, right? Matt Fuller as a redshirt sophomore, 260 last year. Christian Clark, redshirt sophomore from Texas, 226. Running back is not very optimistic, which obviously makes things harder on a quarterback, especially Sellers, who now almost has to be the rushing offense himself as the passer. But what they did do, right? You bring back Nick Harbor, who say everyone can say what they want about Nick Harbor. This is his first offseason where he's been committed to football. He's still been a track athlete for a while. Now he's been refining his route tree, learning coverages, becoming a better all-around receiver and not just an elite athlete at receiver. They also bring in Jaden Gibson from Oklahoma. Now, Gibson has not played a football game since 2023. He has had back-to-back season-ending injuries, and then he left the Sooners in the middle of last year. He's 6'5", 200 pounds, and he averaged almost 27 yards per catch in 2023. He's another Nick Harbor, effectively. So if you have Gibson and Harbor are both on the field, both healthy at the same time, you can't double both of them because then Mazeo Bennett is open in the slot. Nitro Tuggle, a transfer, is open in the slot. So the receiver room for Carolina on paper has tons of mismatches for Sellers to have way better passing options. And they also brought in Jacarius Peak at offensive tackle, superstar from NC State. He was injured before spring playing basketball. Is he back? We're not totally sure yet if he's going to be ready for week one. And if he is there early in the year, is he 100%? Is he ready? Because that's probably going to be their blindside guy for Sellers. So he's incredibly important to bulk up that offensive line. But the running back room is not great. That's my biggest concern. The receiver room, I think, is really good. And it's going to give Sellers a lot of time where, so, I mean, the passing options are good, but then the follow-up question to that is, well, if they can't run the ball, our defense is dropping eight back and limiting that. So there were still some questions for Carolina. It all starts in that running back room, but they did a great job at portaling in, guys on the O line and receiver help to make this passing offense look a lot more lethal on paper.
Can Kendall Browse fix Lawrence Sellers? I mean, again, I love Sellers. He is everything you want if you're building a quarterback from a lab. He has the
Yeah.
speed, the arm, the toughness. You saw him, at times make big plays when it needed to. He was a hot mess last year, and again, as you said, the offensive line was god awful. So they went out and they basically got four transfers to start, and they're counting on Shed Surratt Jr. to basically take a big step up. Can
Mhm.
Browse do for Josh Hoover what for what can he do for Lawrence Sellers what he did for Josh Hoover in terms of make him get the ball out quicker, make him throw better passes, make him just not play hero ball on every play.
Yeah, it seemed like there were times last year where when Carolina was struggling or they were behind, their whole game plan was let's just see if Sellers and Harbor can just do magic. And sometimes they did, right? But that's definitely not sustainable against athletes the caliber that Carolina is playing. So being able to make it more systematic, more reliable, and just easier, right? And more scripted for Sellers, that's incredibly important because we know what he can do when things are going right, like you brought up. But when things are wrong, at least last year, it was gross. So, there's a lot on Bryles to just make it simple, make it easy. But if that's all he has to do, you like to think that he can, right? Because you're not asking him to be extravagant. You're asking him to use the athletes that Carolina have, which are very good athletes, and just scheme up basic, simple things that are easy to execute. And just that in itself will make Carolina's offense way better.
On defense, they got the two pieces. They got Julian Walker and they got Dylan Stewart. Those two alone should just be able to cause havoc on any defense. Jair Johnson's back. Judge Collier is back. Justin Orokonoro is back. And Peyton Williams is back. Can the rest of the defense, though, like in 2024, they were one of the best in the SEC. Last year, they dropped to 10th. So, again, can this team, when you look at this defense, can they actually just get to respectable rather than like last year? Oh yeah, we have a 30-7 lead against Texas A&M, and no, yeah, no, sorry, 30-0 lead. Then all of a sudden, 31 points in the second half, and they went, oh my god, what the hell happened?
Yeah, so you brought up 2024. That year when Carolina's defense was really good, Dylan Stewart had help on the D line from Kyle Kennard. Last year, and Stewart also had it was like almost double checks, if not nine sacks. Last season, he did not have any help. Did Stewart? He only had 4.5 sacks. He was much less effective. The secondary, had to cover for way more time. There was less pressure. They have Julian Walker, the freshman, like you said. They also bring in Caleb Herring from Tennessee, who had 4 sacks and 6 TFLs last year. So this year, I think we're back to Dylan Stewart having the help he needs, where he can be in one-on-one matchups and go be elite and just be a murderer for other quarterbacks. I think that goes hand in hand, obviously, with the entire performance of the defense because a good pass rush, a good edge rusher puts the entire opposing offense off schedule. If they're able to do that, it will just make everybody behind him, behind that D line, look way better, even if they're not playing that good, right? Because all of a sudden, the receiver who just beat the corner, the ball can't even get to him. So then all of a sudden, that corner does not give up a 50-yard touchdown pass. Dylan Stewart having the help he's going to have from Caleb Herring and Julian Walker. Well, obviously, if both those guys pan out very well, but I think together, between Herring and Walker, you will get in the aggregate really good production, and that's going to free up Stewart and make this whole defense way better because of what those guys can do on the front line.
is this basically almost like going all in right now? Because again, Shane Beamer last year, we were talking he could have been fired,
Yeah.
but hey, Vin Lenore Sellers came back. Dylan Stewart said, "Oh, I'm coming back." Nick Harbor said he's coming back, and I'm guessing the SEC went, the South Carolina Gamecocks went, "No, we can't get rid of him." Everybody's promising to come back, but still, 4-8, 1-7, the SEC that doesn't bode well. So, look, if everything goes well, this team could be a sleeper to win the SEC. You have the quarterback, you have the edge guys, you have the wide receiver. It's just what if this is a question like what so what is when we're asking about South Carolina, what if everything goes right, and what is more likely, what if it goes all bad again?
So the range of outcome for Carolina, what I've written down, I did like a ceiling and floor thing for every team. I have my ceiling at 10-2 and my floor at 3-9. I truly think that's the range of outcome for Carolina this year, and it's just kind of in one season what they've done the past 2 years. Right in 2024, 9-3. Last year, 4-8. So I think this year that ceiling is higher because you're no longer freshman Sellers, freshman Harbor, freshman Stewart. There's a lot more growth there. They're just better players overall. They can take that extra step and win that extra game. But the floor is Sellers opting out to go be a pro. Shane Beamer gets fired, right? Stewart and Harvard do the same thing where they have no incentive to end the year because they want to just go to the NFL, not get injured, and they could like the only conference game they win could be that game against Mississippi State. So I think the range of outcomes is 10 wins all the way down to 3 wins. And that's just a microcosm of what this team is that Shane Beamer has built, where it's elite athletes. A lot of it is raw though. So you need a perfect storm for it to work. And that's great. It's really fun when it does. But there's also that box scenario where just sure the athleticism is there, but you're getting out coached, you're getting out executed, and things fall apart.
All right, Tennessee fans are already going, we're getting screwed. Season hasn't even started yet, and Arian Carter got busted for 2 games for accepting flight tickets. Everybody else is getting paid like in Beamers, Elon Musk checks. But no, 2 games where he took, plane tickets. So let's start off here. Does Josh Heupel secretly like this because this is sort of the rallying cry now for Tennessee? Like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we have a new quarterback, but Deshaun Bishop's back, Arian Carter's back, and you know what? They're trying to screw us. So we are basically it's Tennessee versus the world. Could this be the rallying cry right now for the Volunteers? And like, oh, all right, well, you're gonna screw us. Well, we're just gonna come out and show everybody here what's going on.
It definitely could go that direction. I think it's kind of what Heupel's trying to push there. To me, looking at this Tennessee team, they're currently in the year before the year. I think we're going to get to 2027 and we're going to look at Tennessee's roster, what they return, what their coaching stuff looks like, and be talking about a team that can get to Atlanta and make the playoff. The reason why I don't think it happens this year is because, right, I believe it'll be Faison Brandon at quarterback for him. True freshman. I mean, superstar ceiling is a 5-star guy. Can it really happen as a true freshman in this league? I don't think it can. You had Deshaun Bishop there at running back, really good player as a Richard Jr. Then at receiver, right? Mike Matthews, he's back for his junior year. Braylon Staley was the SEC freshman of the year. It's a bunch of underclassmen, guys who are entering their second or third year with the program, like David Sanders at tackle, true sophomore. And defensively, you bring over Jim Knowles, big time ad. That defense was horrible last year. He's obviously the guy that the book on him is that it takes a year or two to get everything going. So Tennessee's roster is full of talent. It's full of promise. I think you're a year ahead if you're really excited about Tennessee. They'll win some games. They'll show promise. Their team is good enough for that. And I think that rally, like you brought up, is going to fire them up to go win some games. But I think you're a year before the year for the Vols this season. You're going to watch them win, maybe pull an upset or two, show some real flashes, maybe just win 7 or 8 games. And then next year, they're ready to go and they're firing on all cylinders.
So let's start off here with the offense. Again, they have pieces around. Mike Matthews is back. Braylon Staley is back. Deshaun Bishop is back. The offensive line, David Sanders, Wendell Moe, Sam Pendleton, Jesse Perry are all back. Again, it comes down to, is it junior Brian Staub? Is it freshman George McIntyre? What are they? Are you hearing is right now the quarterback for Tennessee Volunteers? So do they even know right now? And they're just going, all right, we'll see after Furman what happens.
Yeah, so I mean, Heupel's keeping close to the vest. right? They opened fall camp today, and it was just the for the public viewing, there wasn't a ton of the quarterbacks that they let see because they're obviously trying to keep it very very tight. But they both had very clean passing periods. They both had to be coached up in different ways. There's actually a funny little nugget, but they both missed the exact same throw, the exact same way was like their most notable miss for both quarterbacks. So they're really both playing to the same level. Is what it seems like, and it's very tight. And if that's the situation, I think you give it to Faison Brandon because between the two, whether it's McIntyre or Brandon, it would not be hard for Heupel to admit to you that Brandon is the future of the program and that he's really who they want to invest in for the years to come. So I think you got to, if the quarterback battle is even and you don't believe that McIntyre gives you like a 2 or 3 win advantage over Faison, you put Brandon in, you give him this year to kind of get beat up. Honestly, just be willing to do that. Be willing to have him make his mistakes. Make sure he's willing for that to happen too. I think that Faison gets the job. So then it's kind of what I said before. Like you'll see the flashes, you'll see the ceiling, you'll see the hype, but it just won't quite be ready for a big time year. And then next season we get a full Faison Brandon unlocked elite Tennessee offense.
As you said, Jim Knowles was brought in because after last year's debacle on defense, where just the Georgia game alone, oh yeah, we scored 41 points. Bad news, we gave up 44 points. So again, they went to the transfer portal. They brought in T.J. Metcalf from Michigan, D.J. Burks from Appalachian State. Um, Chaz Coleman came in from Penn State. They brought, Amari Campbell came in from Penn State. So again, hopefully there are pieces on the defense, but it's still Arian Carter. It's still Ty Redmond. Can this defense just be serviceable? Not even like very good, just serviceable. So where, again, they're not giving up like 34 to 44 points per game, and you're looking going, oh my God, this is a track meet.
I think it definitely can be, right? Because giving Jim Knowles this level of talent, I think there's a pretty well established floor that, yeah, sure, maybe I'm in the right offense on the right day. We'll give him a good bit of points. It won't be consistent though. But I mean, losing Chaz Coleman for this year, I mean that's a massive hit, right? Because it was a massive investment for them in the portal. Now he's gone. He's not part of the program anymore. And Jim Knowles today, he was talking about how the pass rush, like that's a question now. It was rotating around Coleman. They don't really know what they have there out coming off the edge now. So that's a big hit. And that might change the calculus a little bit. But bringing in over guys like Xavier Gilliam from Penn State, Amari Campbell from Penn State. You're bringing in guys who are used to what Jim Knowles was doing. They can help instill that culture within the guys who are new to Knowles. I know you brought up Ty Redmond. He's a stud at corner. Kane Lee from Auburn, another really good player there in the secondary. Some good transfers. So the defense will take a step forward from what it was last year because, frankly, I mean, how could it not? But I think it'll be the same thing as the offense, where there are going to be some leaks, mainly stemming from losing Chaz Coleman off the edge there. And then in 2027, you'll look at the roster composition, what Knowles has done, and be like, that's plugged, that's fixed, that's better. Let's go be an elite this fall, like the defense that got us to the playoff in 2024. So I think it's the same story for offense as it is for defense, right? You're going to see some really good promise. You'll see improvement from last year, probably mainly on defense there than more so than offense. But you'll be able to tell us just like one step away that 2027 is going to help fulfill.
Again, just like a lot of these teams, they could be better, but because of the schedule, and this one is, this is just like Old Misses and LSU's. This is sort of, oof. It's starts off Texas State. Okay, starts off with Foreman, not bad. Then at Georgia Tech, then Kennesaw State, then Texas, Auburn, at Arkansas, Alabama, at South Carolina, Kentucky, at Texas A&M, then LSU, and at Vanderbilt. Again, this could be a losing season for Josh Heupel, even though, as you said, there's talent. They're on the upswing. It's just, again, new quarterback, schedule from hell. Again, can Tennessee fans be patient, or is this going to be one of those years where it's fire Heupel?
The fire Heupel chants have kind of already been going on, which I don't agree with. It's going to be hard to convince a lot of Tennessee fans to be patient with like a 7-5, unless it's a 7-5 that where you like beat Bama at home, and like maybe you beat LSU at home too, and then you just kind of lose some other good teams on your schedule. The patience with Heupel is kind of wearing thinner than I would have thought than I think it should be at this point, and it's going to be hard to kind of keep that faith if it is 6 and 6 or 7-5 barring, a Bama win mixed in there. Maybe, an A&M win on the road mixed in there. Can you beat if they lose to Vandy for a second year in a row, that'll also make it way worse for them. But I do think I tend to see a 7-5. I think they're right around there. If that's going to be the record, I don't think Heupel gets fired at 7-5. Period. I think that the goodwill from the fans will be much higher if it is 7-5 that includes a Bama win, maybe an LSU win, definitely a Vandy win, and some of those flashes of, okay, this is what Brandon can do. This is what TK Keys can do, a receiver. This is what this defense can become. You're going to have to show that promise if you do go 7-5 against your Heupel to kind of just keep the heat off your back.
No excuses for Texas. If you, it feels like Arch. We talked about LSU and their ridiculous talent. Well, Texas went. You know what? If you can do that, we can do that with just a couple people. What is last year? They thought they were 10-3, 6-2. Arch came along in the end, and they went. You know what? He needs more weapons. So what do they do? Oh, they stole Hollywood Smothers from NC State and Alabama. They went. That's not good enough. And then they got Relic Brown from Arizona State. And they went. No, that's not good enough either. They got tackle Melvin Siani from Wake Forest. And I said, yeah, you know what? That's not even good enough. And then they got here, the freak wide receiver who many say could be the best wide receiver in college football, Cam Coleman. After 2 years of mired with bad quarterbacks, Cam Coleman now finds himself with Arch Manning, that, just cavalcade of talent at running back, Ryan Wingo, and at Mosley the fifth. Is there any excuse for Texas not to put up at least 30 points per game with this offense?
No. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, you brought up all the skill players. I won't go through them again. And the biggest thing last year, right, besides Arch, just working through the wrinkles, some injuries too, was that offensive line. I think it's way better this year, right? You brought up Siani from Wake Forest. Trevor Gooseby at left tackle is an NFL player already. They bring in Lawrence Seymour at guard, who's a graduate, and then Connor Robertson is a senior at center. Brandon Baker is a junior. There's so much experience. And in terms of Brandon Baker specifically, right, he's 6'4", 305. He started 11 games at right tackle last year for Texas. Now he's moving into guard, where physically he fits in way better. So I think you're upgrading both right tackle by frankly taking him away from it, and right guard by putting Baker at that spot. So the offensive line should be way more improved, which is going to keep Arch upright, healthy, give him time to throw to these elite receivers, give the running backs room to run. The offense is crazy this year. It should be very good. One of the best in the country.
Could the defense be even better, though? I mean, again, we talked about, oh, yeah, well, we need talent. We're going to get talent. And again, you look at Hero Kanu, Colin Simmons, Alex January. Man, that defense alone is just good. So what do they do? Oh, you know what? We need a linebacker. So they got, basically Pitt's the all-star linebacker, ACC defensive player, stud Rasheem Biles to come in. And then they got Justin Cryer to come in. Oh, by the way, they also brought in just for, giggles, Ian Gefford for help at defensive tackle. You got Grace Littleton, Jelani McDonald back in the secondary. Again, is this team almost even better in terms of just pure talent than even LSU? I mean, I'm looking at Texas defense like, holy crap, they might be better than last year. Last year, they're pretty damn good.
I think it can be. And what fires me up most about this defense is the staffing moves. Right? So they brought Will Muschamp back to be the G coordinator. That's good enough on its own. They also just brought in Mark Stoops to just kind of hang around and be an assistant. Right? So he gets fired from Kentucky, or he leaves. I forget the exact situation around that. But you go from the head coach of an SEC team that held this Texas offense last year to only 13 points through overtime. Now you're adding him to your defensive staff just as an assistant, not even as the DC. So Muschamp and Stoops on that defensive staff is going to give this Texas defense, for as much talent as they already have, a level of toughness, grit, physicality that they didn't even have last year. So you add that into the absurd amount of NFL players on this defense. I said about the offense, I think it's the same thing with the defense. This could be the best defense in the country if everything goes right.
Can Arch Manning basically just be what everybody thinks he should be. I mean, last year got ridiculous. I mean, the running joke was, "Oh yeah, Arch Manning will win the Heisman, lead into a national championship, he'll cure cancer." No, no pressure. And again, he that Ohio State game I think took like games off of him. He got beat up, and then the Florida game took some games off him. He was injured, and yet he still came along. Came along in the last 5 out of 6 weeks with big games against Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and even Texas A&M. So again, can Arch Manning just be very good? Not doesn't have to be great, just very good.
I think so. I'm even saying I'd be willing to say he can get to the great status, right? Because I mean, you look at the end of last year, the games he had against A&M, Michigan, just to end that season. I mean, he was elite with his arm and with his legs because he was healthy. He was getting used to what college football is. He had kind of shaken those expectations that nobody in the world could have handled at the beginning of the year. And now you come into this year, sure, the expectations are kind of high again, but you have so much more talent around you. He's now used to how to, deal with those, and he's had the confidence on the field at the end of last year to really get there. I'm all the way there with Arch last year. One of the things I'm most proud of for myself last season was last summer I was on the train of it's not going to happen this year, be my Heisman pick next year, and that's exactly where I'm at. I think this is a Heisman year for Arch, given how much talent is around him. I think you saw him get better as the year went on last year, which is just how players develop. It made total sense to me seeing that happen. I do believe this is the year. Sure, sure, Texas is back, yada yada yada. This is Arch Manning's year. This is Texas's year. I am in love with this team this fall.
The other Texas team might have something to say about it. That is Anton's Texas A&M Texas A&M Aggies. So let's start off here with them. They were supposed to be the odds-on favorite. They've won 11 straight games, and then the bottom fell out, and it was, oh yeah, they lost to Texas. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. And then they only put 3 points against Miami, which everybody was at the time was like freaking out. We didn't realize how good Miami was, but so with Texas A&M, how much pressure? It sounds weird for me saying this. How much pressure is there on Mike Elko, not just to get to the playoffs, but actually win the big game when he's starting to get that reputation of Mario Cristobal 2.0. In the crunch time, they throw up on themselves.
I do think there's a good bit, right? Just because I think he's one of the best coaches in the SEC. I do believe he's already there. But with all the resources that he's given at A&M, right? The fact that they kind of fell flat on their face at the end of last season, there's definitely that feeling of like, all right, we need to take that step this year, right? When we get to the Texas game, with a trip to Atlanta on the line, we've got to go get it done. There's no excuse not get it done. So there's definitely that pressure. But in terms of his job, right? I mean, I'm not worried about him unless something that amazing happens. I don't believe we ever get to a point this year where fans are talking about Elko maybe moving on. But there's definitely that pressure for him to go finish what they're able to start. If they're able to start it again this year, just within if you go 10-0 again, can you finish the season? If you get to the playoff, can you win that game? Pressure on him in that sense, but I don't think we get to any point this year, job pressure wise, where fans are like, all right, we need to move on from this guy. I don't think we get there.
I'll start with the defense for them. They brought in a ton of talent. It's Texas, so they have money to spend. So they lose a lot of players, especially Cassius Howell. So what do we do? Oh, Anton Saka, we'll steal you away from Northwestern. Oh, you know what? Hey, let's see if we can get Ray Coney come on in. C.J. Mims come on in. Hey, Ricky Gibson III come on in. They lost a lot on defense, but could this still be a very damn good defense? Because, hey, they got Coney from Tulsa, they got Saka from Northwestern, and it's still a very veteran defense.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of adding Saka to try and offset the loss of Cassius Howell. I don't know if he can be what Howell was, but I do think he's a really good pickup to just kind of to limit the drop off at least. And in the secondary, right, Ricky Gibson the third, he barely got to play last season because he was injured early on there with Tennessee. Now, is that a pro or a con, right? Because you have less miles on him, but he also hasn't played the whole time. I think is a good pairing with Des Ricks there in the secondary, though. So there's tons of really good talent on this defense. I am interested to see just what it looks like because of how because of how many new pieces there are. So even though they're really talented, it's a lot different. There's going to be a bunch of different guys that you're relying on than you were last season. So that difference, that change does always come with questions to me, not necessarily concerns, but questions. But the talent is certainly there, and we should get a pretty good feel decently early on, right? Because Arizona State, their offense should be fine. Kentucky's offense, I do believe, is going to be good. They get LSU in week 4, so we'll know pretty early on what this defense really does look like.
Gets back to the offense, and once again for the first, I'd say 11 games, Marcel Reed was everything and everything. Him and Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver were just dynamic. And then the last 2 games, it just fell off a roof, and he just sort of threw up on himself. So again, he's back, and Craver's back. They brought in Isaiah Horton, transfer all the way from Alabama. Horton's 6'4", and Craver are going to be nightmares. The offensive line, they redid that. They brought in, Wilkin Fromkin from Alabama, Tyree Adams from LSU, Trayvon Bond, Cohen Eccles. Can Marcel Reed now just be consistent? That's the question over in Aggie Stadium. Is just, can this guy literally just be a guy who game in, game out doesn't just make these plays where it's like, yes, it's great, and then, oh my God, what the hell was he thinking?
I do think, just by nature of having another year under his belt, right? Because last year was his first year as a full-time starter. That's not really something that people a lot because of how long he's been a factor at A&M, but last year was his first year as a 12-game starter. So now you enter year 2 of that. You like the odds of that getting better, but his OC left, right? Colin Klein's now the head coach at Kansas State. So even though they promoted from within, so it's not like it's a brand new change, what does that do, to the in-game adjustments? Not even just during practice, how's he like him there, but can the new OC, can the new look offensive staff be as good or maybe even better than the previous staff was in terms of helping Marcel out in the game when maybe he gets sped up, maybe after he makes a mistake? Um, that's my biggest question. So I do believe that Reed mentally, just on in a vacuum, his skill set, his mind will be better. It's the same thing with Chambliss and Ole Miss, right? Does the coaching change hurt him in a way that maybe those improvements get overshadowed by maybe new deficits?
All right, so again, what is success for Texas A&M? Because last year it felt like they just sort of snuck up. It was, oh yeah, they won the first 2 games, okay, yeah. Then Notre Dame, all right, but hey, they squeaked by Notre Dame, and then it was they stacked up wins against Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, at Arkansas, but then LSU, well, LSU fired their coach, and that whole thing went to hell in a handbasket. Missouri, pop gun offense. South Carolina, tailed 2 first halves. This year the schedule is a lot tougher. It's at Arizona State September 12th. Arizona State comes to them September 12th. Then at LSU on September 26th. Then you got Alabama later on the end of the year, at Oklahoma, at Texas. I mean, again, I think they'll be better, but just like a lot of these teams, like they could go 8-4, and it's just, well, this is the SEC, and again, this team is going to not have like last year's sort of easy schedule compared to the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, with the win total being at 8.5 and just what they did last year, I think that success, at least from a fan perspective, is a playoff berth. I think that they obviously want to get to Atlanta, but if they make it back to the play, they don't make the SEC title game, I still think they can stomach that. But to your point, I'm 8-4 for the Aggies this year. I think the schedule is just brutal, right? You're having to replace so many stars on defense, and they did bring in good players, but can they replicate that same just meaning to the squad? What is it like without Colin Klein? Success is probably a playoff berth. I don't have them getting there. So then I'll also be disappointed in College Station. But I think even if they do disappoint this year, there won't be any shortage of resources, of commitment to the football program. So they'll be right back here next year if they do go 8-4 again. But that's where I have the Aggies this year.
Finally, we've got to talk about your team. That is Vanderbilt. And Diego Pavia is gone. He finally, after years of him being there in college football, he finally moved on, and now it's all on a 5-star recruit. Jared Curtis is the quarterback. No pressure. Hey, you're just following the biggest success story ever in Vanderbilt. No pressure. The sky's the limit for him. I mean, when people talk about Curtis, it's like, hey, this kid might be the real deal. But how much should we expect from a true freshman who, oh yeah, this is the SEC. Those guys usually just don't come in to set the world on fire.
Yeah. Um, the Jared Curtis thing, the ceiling is incredibly high, right? And there's a reason he was rated how he is coming out of high school. He's an incredible player. I'm looking at Vandy this year, their offense as a whole, and this isn't only Curtis in on his own, but this is the most obvious regression step back situation I've seen in a long time. Right? Vandy has their best year in program history. They win 10 games. Diego Pavia, Eli Stowers, and Trey Richardson are all gone. I mean, those three guys were so. I mean, I don't even to say it, but like they were so incredibly important to what the offense did last year. Now all three of them are out. So Jared Curtis, a true freshman, all the talent in the world. He's throwing in Junior Sherrill, right? Great, good player. Ja'Cory Thomas from ODU. That's really all the returning receiver production. You have great running backs in Cedric Alexander and McKillen Young, really good runners, and Evan Hitt as a freshman. So that's going to take pressure off of what Curtis has to do. I still think you're going to watch Vandy this year. If it is Curtis who does get that job, and you're going to see just the physical tools, you're going to watch him rip the ball downfield, even though they might not always be completed. They'll be good looking throws. I think this is a very developmental year for Vandy. I think it's a step back year just by the nature of who they're losing, and just can't the level of talent they were able to actually bring in just wasn't the same. You're going to be a step back year for Vandy. That does not mean Vandy is back to what they used to be. It just means they're coming off of Diego Pavia leaving their program.
The defense has some talent, and look, they brought in Ricardo Jones from Clemson, who tied the ACC last year with 6 interceptions. They got Glenn Seabrooks is back, Miles Capers is back, Brian Longwell is back, Martell Height is back. Are they going to rely on the defense for early on? Again, it's like, we talk their schedule: Austin P, Delaware, NC State, at Auburn. Like, how much is Clark Lee going to lean on this defense to go just keep us in the game, just keep us in the game and let us win an ugly game?
Yeah, I think early on his defense and running backs for Vandy is going to really have to just drive them to start. And that secondary is really good, right? I mean, that's where they have most of their returning talent. You brought up Martell Height at corner. CJ Hurry is back there at safety also. He started all 13 games last year for the Commodores. And their front seven is fine, right? You have Miles Capers coming back as a graduate. He's probably their most productive guy, 4.5 sacks last fall. But then Brian Allen Jr., half a sack last year in Iowa. A guy like Glenn Seabrooks at D tackle, half a TFL last year in all 13 games. So the front seven is definitely missing some production on paper here, at least preseason. So you're going to be relying a lot on that secondary just to keep things in front of them. And with Clark Lee's mindset as a coach, which is just physical, just don't get outworked by the other guy. I like having to rely on, unknowns in the front seven because I believe they're going to be playing with that physicality and toughness that they need. But it's definitely going to be defense, mainly that secondary and running game to at least start the year for Vandy that they're relying on.
Final question. We have to let you go because now we're basically running out of time here. So with Vanderbilt, again, it's life after Pavia. And you always say, well, one guy doesn't make a program, but he literally turned them around. And Clark Lee, a lot of people say, is a very good damn coach. He brought in some good transfers. He brought in Ja'Cory Thomas. He brought in Cole Adams. He brought in Javante Connor. So if Curtis starts, he has some weapons. Cedric Alexander is back. Can they get a winning record, though? Again, it starts off easy with Austin P, Delaware, NC State, and then again at Auburn, at Georgia, Ole Miss, then at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Alabama, at Florida, Tennessee to end the year. Like, should Vandy fans expect just a winning record, or should they look and go, this could be a 4-8 team just because we lost everything and anything last year?
Yeah, I'm 6-6 for Vandy this year. I think they're right there on the with bowl eligibility. Just 3-6 in conference play because I do think that you're going to see Curtis develop as the year goes on, right? And he has enough good talent at wide receiver where he'll have really good passing games, right? It's not like there's no one he can throw to out there. And the running game with Alexander, MK, Young, and Evan Hampton, I think is going to be very strong. So I think it's good enough to win them games that they should win. I don't think it's enough to go, win that game against Ole Miss at home. I don't think it's enough to go win in the swamp or win at Jordan Hare. So I think it's going to be a pretty cutter year for Vandy this year. I think they're going to just frankly win the games that they're favored by a field goal win and lose the games that they're dogs by a field goal win. I think it'll be that simple, just how this team plays out. I'm 6-6 for Vandy, and it's not going to feel very good. just after last year, and the national narrative will definitely be, oh, there goes Vandy, right back to the bottom again. That's obviously not going to be the case with what Clarkley is doing and this era of the sport. But I'm 6 wins for Vandy. I think it'll be a modest year. You'll see flashes from Jared Curtis. You'll see flashes from the younger guys on that defense to keep you excited about next year. I don't think Vandy's going anywhere. I think they'll keep recruiting better, better and better, and getting guys in the portal better and better. But this year, I think I'm 6-6, fringe bowl eligibility, kind of a reset year for the Commodores.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we always love having on the show. I give you it is from Tailgate Talk SEC and Home Squad Sports. I give you it's Will Thomas. Will, before we let you go, where can fans check you out at? Where is the YouTube channel? I'm guessing you have a Substack, Twitter. What's going on with you this week in terms of your shows, and what can we expect for you until the launch of college football officially?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Will Thomas CFB, and then Tailgate Talk SEC everywhere else on YouTube, TikTok, all of it. And we got fall camp starting today. We're full swing previews here with football really around the corner. So just daily content of the SEC, fall camp, intel, all of it. So come hang out.
Will Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always honor and pleasure having him on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here, only on It's Last Call. Last Call at the Alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.